Mhm. All right, I think we're ready. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February 19th and State Building Code Council meeting. I'm Diane Glenn, the chair of the council. I want to welcome everyone that's participating and all the council members. And this is our new format with the Zoom. So this is very interesting today, but I can see you, most of you. So that'll be really a nice thing to have. We're going to start off. Stoyan, would you like to do the introductions for the council members? Or are you there, or do you want, oh, how do you want to do that? Are you prepared?
I'm here. Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Do you mind doing the roll call?
Yes, I will do it. Diane Glenn, Chair, General Construction, Residential and Multifamily Housing.
Here.
Andrew Klein, Vice Chair, General Public, east of the Cascade Crest.
I'm here.
Leanne Geyer, City Elected Official.
I am still here.
Al French, County Elected Legislative Body Member or Elected Executive and east of the Cascade Crest. Okay, Al is not here. Doug Orr, General Construction, Commercial and Industrial Building.
Is that me? It's Doug. I'm here. Couldn't tell.
Rob Graper, Structural Engineering Profession, east of the Cascade Crest. Tony Dawn, Local Government Fire Service Official, east of the Cascade Crest.
Here.
Chell Anderson, Architectural Design Profession.
Here.
Okay. Phil Lemley, City Elected Legislative Body Member or Mayor, east of the Cascade Crest. Okay. Barry Long, representing Community with Disabilities. I know the answer. Corey Welker, Construction Building Trades.
Here.
Okay. Rob Hamlin, County Elected Legislative Body Member or Elected Executive.
Here.
Caroline Traub, Mechanical Engineering Profession.
Here.
Micah Chappell.
Here.
Todd. I can say your last name. I was practicing, but unsuccessfully. Manufacturers, installers, or suppliers of building materials or components, and Todd is also east of the Cascade Crest.
Here, thank you.
Sorry again for the last name. I didn't want to embarrass myself.
No need, but thank you.
Okay, ex officio members, Representative Mike Chapman. Representative Larry Huff. Senator Linda Wilson. Senator Joe Gwen. Rod Much, Labor and Industries.
Eric.
Okay. And we have, I hope I didn't see his name, but our new Assistant Attorney General, Dirk Meyer-Buchtel.
Almost 100%, so then I'll give you a B+ for that.
Okay, thank you very much. I was worried about it. And I don't know if David is here, David Merchant.
I don't think David's here yet.
Okay,
He'll join us in a little bit.
we have a quorum.
Thank you, Stoyan. Anybody from the public that would like to be recognized?
Yes, good morning. This is Terry Beals representing Sound Transit.
This is Lee Craiglow, Deputy Building Official at the City of Moses Lake, looking for an opportunity to address the council and the public comments portion of it.
Hi, I'm Norm McCalca. I'm with National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors. NAFED is the acronym that's posted all over. Good morning for you, good afternoon for me.
This is Michael Abrams. I'm with Jensen Hughes Fire Protection Engineers.
Good morning, everyone. Jed Sherman with the
representing Guardian Security.
Yeah, I think I heard Jed. Who was the other person?
Apologies. This is Christopher Moy with Guardian Security.
This is Dave Cocotte with the Washington State Association of Fire Marshals.
Bill Greenwood from Building Energy.
Damon Doyle, Viridian Northwest and Lexar Homes.
Craig Roberts, Conduit Homes in Spokane.
Damon Jag with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
John Napier with the Washington State Association of Fire Marshals.
Gavin Tenold, Washington Solar Energy Industry.
Anyone else? All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to have the participation and the council members in attendance. Okay, before we get started on the agenda, we do have a special recognition. Richard is here, and he's our retired managing director, and we're not going to put you on camera. But we did want to recognize all his efforts the last years that he's been with us, and so we put together a little thing for you. And we put together a letter, and I'm going to read the letter so we can really embarrass you. And you're not on camera.
I'm not on camera, so it's okay.
He's bright red. Dear Richard, on the occasion of your retirement, we all want to thank you for your service and leadership. Everyone agrees that you possess a rare combination of vision, fairness, and understanding. And of course, not to forget the effective sense of humor, critical qualities for an effective manager. Many of us have additional personal reasons for our gratitude, for you have given special attention to our specific needs. Without going into detail, we give you special thanks for your caring. We thank you for all you have done and all you have taught us, and send our very best wishes for a happy retirement. We all wish you we all will miss you very much. And I signed as chair and Stoyan signed, but it's from the whole council. Okay, one last thing. We have a packet, and you can see this here. And in the packet is a special gift from all the council members. And there's a card in there. There's a special little gift for you. And we also contributed some special personal notes for you. So you can take this and read them at your leisure. And happy retirement.
I didn't realize you could get a whoopee cushion in such a small envelope. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege and an honor to be part of this. God knows more. Thanks.
Okay, well, he's not crying yet, but we can move on.
He's a big baby.
Oh, yeah, it's for you. So you can take it with you.
Thanks.
All right.
I'm leaving you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
All right.
Richard,
Good luck, Richard.
for everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
Good luck, Richard.
Party on.
Thank you. You bet. All right, back to the meeting. The first thing on the agenda is we want to review and approve the agenda. And we have revised it a few times, but this is the final version. So I'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
This is
So
Lee.
moved.
I move to approve today's agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the agenda is approved. So we'll open it up for any public comment that's not an item on the agenda.
Good morning. This is Lee Craiglow again, Deputy Building Official with the City of Moses Lake. I appreciate this opportunity to address the council. It's in a form of a statement and possibly a question. I, on occasion, will review some legislative actions that are going on in the state, and I came across a new or revised WAC, Chapter 173-443 from the Department of Ecology that deals with hydrofluorocarbons and its use and distribution in the state. And one of the things that, if I've read it correctly, they've basically outlawed sheet type foam insulation and spray applied urethane insulation. Our currently adopted energy codes rely quite a bit on some of these types of products for compliance. I was curious if the State Building Code Council was aware of this and if this is going to be addressed in the future with future adoptions of the energy code.
I can contribute an answer to that if.
Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
Yes, some sheet insulation products with really high global warming potential has been eliminated as of, I think, January 1 of this year, or at least not that you can't manufacture it after that date and sell it in Washington. So if it's already stockpiled, I believe it can still be used in Washington. There are many sheet insulation products that still can contribute to meeting the energy code. I think XPS was kind of the one with a really high global warming potential that that some forms of XPS by some manufacturers with really high global warming potentials are now excluded. But it's amazing when these rules are put out, manufacturers can miraculously put product on market with that do meet the criteria, and a lot of them just took the product they're already selling in Europe and are now selling it in the United States. So there's, to the best of my knowledge, there's plenty of products out there that meet this criteria, including some XPS products, but also EPS, the mineral wool, and other products. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that. I'd love to hear if there's a specific challenge that you're encountering in this. We should address that if there are holes in the market right now.
Well, being from Eastern Washington, the use of the spray applied urethane type insulation is used quite extensively in our agricultural community. Our CA warehouses and that'll spray this type of insulation in. And from what I've read, unless I've read it wrong, I don't even know that there's a replacement for that product yet. In the definitions of the restricted types of insulation, it goes beyond the styrene type, I believe it's the XPS type insulation. It gets into some of the polyurethane, polyiso, and that. So it's pretty wide sweeping of what the restrictions are. It's going to affect our ICF industry. We have several buildings here in the city that have been or proposed to be built using the ICF construction, and it's going to affect our EFIS industry that's using the polystyrene type insulation or foam insulation as an underlayment for these synthetic stucco products. So it's like I say, it cuts a pretty wide swath through the energy code and through the industry.
That's great to hear. I mean, it's not great to hear that it's cutting challenge for the industry, but it's great feedback. I think I would like to know more about this. And I don't know what the process is for finding out more about it, and perhaps reacting to it.
Is this a bill that is currently in process?
This is it's been it's in place. It actually went into effect January 10th of this year.
So we do have,
like I said, it's chapter 173-443 of the WAC. There's a lot of information in there of why we've went this route, a lot of the history, and some very specific lines in there of what's affected by this. It includes refrigerants and a number of other products. But like I say, if you go to the Ecology's website, look for the 173-443, and it's pretty eye-opening of what the state's done to our industry.
So the Energy Code tag, of which I'm the chair, did look at this legislation after it passed. And among the 20 or so members of that tag that have expertise across a wide variety of construction and design and regulation, nobody brought this particular issue up. We anticipated that it would eliminate some board insulation, but it was not brought up that it would substantially affect other forms of insulation that are commonly used in Washington. So I think the tag should look at this, or some other entity should look at this and get more information from you and from the builders that are apparently being challenged to meet the Energy Code with their standard methods.
I do know that I do know that the chemical manufacturers that make the blowing agent were involved in that legislation through their lobbyists. So my understanding is that the products do exist, that it's out there. So this might be something the Department of Commerce too, we can wrap them in, since they'll be the one enforcing these requirements.
Wasn't it Ecology that was writing the rules for this?
It was, however, the Department of Commerce is the one who's going to have to put some sort of stamp on products that then the building code official would be able to see, yes, that's approved for installation. That way the building official is not the one who has to enforce this.
that's correct.
Okay. Ray, do you want to add your comment?
Yeah, you asked if that was an existing bill. And yes, that bill went through last year, but I believe that there is a new companion bill to this on our legislative report. I remember helping Stoyan with an analysis, but it might be in the report. So I think there is something, I don't know if it addresses this issue, but there is some companion bill currently on the floor.
Okay.
If it's in the ledge report, we missed the details that Lee just shared. So we need to research that, and we can provide more information. So we'll coordinate with Lee if he can help us to get the entire information, and also with Chill and the Energy TAC.
Good idea. We will follow up on this. Yes. Thank you for bringing this up. It's an important.
Thank you for your time. If there's any questions that I may be able to help with, you can reach me through the City of Moses Lake here.
Encourage him to go to the meeting.
Thank you again.
Okay. Yeah. And if you can get involved with the tags, the current tags or upcoming tags, that would be great.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anything else that's not on the agenda you would like to address? Okay, we'll go right into the next item, which is to review the minutes of the previous meeting, which was January 6th. Has everybody had a chance to look that over? And do we have any public comment on the minutes? All right, council members, I will need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I second it. This is Leanne.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any discussion on the minutes? Any corrections? All right. The minutes will stand as written. Good job. All right, going on to the legislative committee. Is the next item.
You want the lead plug up with the legislative issue?
Let's do the first item is empower the legislative committee to act on behalf of the council. And just a little background on this, we did this last year, and I believe we gave the authority to the managing director and to the chair of the legislative committee. So we need, now that we're well into the session, we need to address this. Stoyan, do you have comments on this or any insight, or should we just address this?
We had a discussion with Dirk, and he's here if questions come up, and you can follow with the discussion. And I also have Shannon. Can you share the bylaws?
It's not on the screen there.
I see the agenda.
Sorry.
What? Oh, I thought you had it. Yeah, you did. That's good.
Okay, so these are the important sections from the bylaws, just for information purposes. This is related to the authority that the Ledge Committee has, and this is for the council members to take into account when you're discussing the first bullet point.
Okay.
So I guess, what are we empowering people to do?
This, the bylaws gives the legislative committee the charge of monitoring all the legislative bills that pertain to the council and then report back to the council and make recommendations for considerations to the council. It doesn't actually give the authority to anyone to actually like testify at the legislature. So that's what we're discussing today. Should we give at least the managing director the charge of being able to testify at the legislature based on the recommendations from the legislative committee or the council?
Diane, it's Doug, if I can speak to this issue.
Yes, please do, because you were there last year.
This has been one of my things for a while. So for the benefit of the rest of the council members that aren't maybe actively involved in the legislative committee during session meets, as we all know, once a week and reviews legislation that affects the council. And from time to time, there's legislation that comes up that we may want to take a position on, or as Diane indicated, may be wanting to provide testimony at hearing or whatever. And I guess the bottom line point is that the committee has no authority to do anything other than report back. And because the cycle of the entire council, the council meetings doesn't coincide necessarily with legislative session or the legislative subcommittee meetings. The legislative subcommittee is essentially doesn't have any real use. It doesn't really provide anything. Yes, we come back and can report what we see, but you don't need a committee to do that. I mean, I've long had the position that committee needs to have the authority to take action on behalf of the council. There's been previous council members that have disagreed with that. Maybe there still are. But again, it remains my opinion and belief that that legislative committee, to be effective, needs to have the ability to take action. And I think there could be certain safeguards that could be in place, whether it be, you know, concurrence with the council chair and or the executive director. But again, it needs to be some, it seemed like for that committee to have a real true function and purpose, there needs to be some ability to take action. Now, I don't know that this particular year there's been any legislative proposed legislation that have risen to that criteria. At least not that I'm aware of. There could be, but I don't know about it. But in years past, there's been times when that would have been an important feature. And there's been years past where the council has authorized, well, for example, when I was chair, there was not a specific council vote to authorize testimony before committee on an issue regarding funding for the a bill affected funding of the council. That you know, it was a couple, 3 years ago. So it's just that I think I would like to see the bylaws be amended so that the council has some, the legislative committee has some ability to act.
Okay. Do you have a proposal for that, or?
Well, I hadn't really actually worked up a proposal, but I guess I would like to hear what other council members think about that. If they're amenable, it seems like it wouldn't be very hard to, you know, we're essentially past the window this year, so we're talking about probably wouldn't really have any import until next session, next January. But you know, I would like to hear some discussion by other council members what their feelings are on the issue.
Oh, this is Andrew. I agree. I think over the next year, we can put together some language that's got enough checks and balances in it that all council members can be comfortable with our getting involved, you know, and speaking for the entire council as legislative members.
Council Chair?
Yes.
This is Todd Byerther. So if I can restate what I think we're all hearing is representation, you know, primarily by the director and perhaps the chair, but the question is really, is it permission to represent based on action taken by the whole council, action taken by the whole committee, or perhaps just by the chair along with the council, or the chair of the committee and the chair of the council? And I think I would advocate for action by the committee as a starting point, but open to feedback.
I would agree with that.
This is Joe. I agree with that as well. And I think we would want to limit testimony to the column that is impact on the Building Code Council itself, and not necessarily impact on stakeholders, because almost every bill has impact on stakeholders of the Building Code Council, the built environment. So I would suggest that we provide that guardrail in there, that it's, how does this impact the Building Code Council and our ability to meet our legislative requirements, but not all impacts on stakeholders.
Correct. So Stoyan, going forward on this, if we can work up some language, would we actually have to revise the bylaws?
In my opinion, yes, but I would ask Dirk to share his opinion as well, because I'm not an attorney. As far as I see it, I would say yes, but
I've got the magic attorney powers.
Yes.
So this is, none of you even know who I am, right? You're like, who's this guy? Real quick, I am the assigned Assistant Attorney General to represent the council. I'm here to help all of you and the council be successful in the work that you're doing. And in anticipation of this meeting, we was aware that this question would surface during the meeting. They did some research and looked at the bylaws. I heard initially think from Doug that the proposal would be to amend the bylaws, and I agree that that would have to be the way to move forward. And why is that? Because currently under the bylaws, any position that's taken by the council has to be supported by a majority of the council vote. So if the proposal is that that bills that arise surface during session touch on the work of the council, not the substantive work that drives the work of the council, but the actual operational work of it. My view would be, echo Stoyan, that would be an issue that, at least under the current bylaws, would need a majority vote. And if the council wants to go in a different direction than that, I think there would need to be an amendment to the bylaws.
So the short term, we could vote today to empower staff to advocate on behalf. Long term, we need a bylaws change.
I want to step in, if you don't mind. I had the opportunity to meet some members of the legislative committee last week, and we mentioned, I don't even get to too many details of it, but since 2018, I think you all know, staff for the council, Stoyan, and other staff are employed by DES and are staff of DES. And so that potentially creates, at the very least, some optics issues if the Stoyan, for example, were tasked on behalf of the council to advocate for something before the legislature, because that might not be the policy that DES leadership or that the governor would support. That's not to say that there would be anything necessarily unethical about it or be a violation of the law, but there might be some, it might create some political questions or challenges. So I wanted to throw that out because that was something that was touched on at that meeting, and I've had some conversations with DES staff and with Stoyan about what that might look like, and want to make sure that council members are aware of those discussions.
And I want to clarify what I'm doing for DES. For each new bill that somehow involves the council, I do analysis for DES, and I can recommend amendments to the bill, or I can share a position that was discussed during the Leg Committee meetings, but this is where all it ends. So in for some bills, DES has a position, and it's not necessarily the State Building Code Council. So my recommendation ends with the analysis I do for DES, and after that, I have no control, and I don't know what is happening.
So this is Micah. Sorry, I raised my hand. I wanted to put in some information and voice my concerns on modifying the bylaws. I do have some concerns with this, especially based on the vote at the last Building Code Council meeting, where we were significantly split on some of the directions the State Building Code Council should take on implementing the codes for this year. Unfortunately, that vote did get overturned by the governor's office, but I have some concerns of putting that, let's say, testimony power or decision power into just the legislative committee members' hands. I think that the chair should have the power to testify, but I think it should be based off of the vote of the entire council, not just the committee members, because we are split in some of these items. I know there are some committee members that would like to see, say, the current bill, again, that's being pushed to have ex officio members have a voting seat on the State Building Code Council. Well, if the members of the legislative committee say they want that, but the rest of the council may not, then only the testimony is going to come from those 3 or 4 members of the committee. So I do have some concerns, because I see that if the committee makeup is, unified in a direction that the whole council is not, that we could significantly modify or damage even the standing of the State Building Code Council. So I have some concerns. I think it should be modified to some extent to where the chair could testify on behalf of the State Building Code Council, but that testimony would need to come from the entire council, would be at least what I would like to see in the bylaw change.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Melissa. And I'm going to jump in there because I totally agree. And in the past, that's what has happened. The chair of the council and I think the managing director, but we could do the legislative chair or whatever you choose. But any issue that was a recommendation from the legislative committee to maybe address in testimony had to go to the council, get their approval to authorize that testimony. So it wasn't just the legislative committee. So no, I agree. We need to have that kind of control on that. So today, we could do this in a short term and then deal with maybe changing the bylaws in the long term, not today. But we could maybe just give that authority today if everyone agrees or however you want to go forward or not. So I guess I'm asking if you want to address this today and for the rest of the session, and or do you want to just let this go and we can address a bylaw change in the future?
Diane, this is Micah. I'd be happy to make a motion on allowing the chair to do that, but I do have some questions first. Do you have some specific recommendations that we should consider as far as allowing the chair to testify on items at this time, or are we just looking for an open-ended, you can do it during this session no matter what, would be my question.
Right. At this time, we have no recommendations from the legislative committee to go and actually testify. So there's no bills that are actually, I mean, we're monitoring, but there's nothing at this point.
And we have 7 bills that are alive, and I will share with you the bills after you finish with this item and this conversation.
Okay. Well, with that, then I would make a motion to allow the chair to testify on behalf of the State Building Code Council members, as long as there's approval from those State Building Code Council members on any recommendations that they see fit on any of the bills.
Well, we don't need that motion. That power already exists. We can, as a council, can take a vote anytime to authorize the chair to go testify before the legislature. We don't need a motion to authorize that.
Okay, so what are we looking for today?
Well, Doug, I thought that with that was last year, but it's not in the bylaws. So I thought it was just, we had to address this every year.
I think we can take action we could take a vote of the council as far as I know.
As far as I'm reading the bylaws, Doug, I don't see that the chair has the authority to testify. I see that the legislative committee has authority to develop recommendations to consider by the council, but I don't see in the bylaws that the chair has authority to testify. Am I missing something?
I would defer to our AG, but show me where the chair doesn't have the authority to testify.
Yeah, so I'll jump in if folks don't mind. The bylaws don't speak specifically to that. And so I think that there's a lot of space, a couple options here. So the council could designate now just generally the chair or any other person to testify on behalf of the council when the council takes a position on legislation. Or you could do it when the position is taken on legislation. So if during the session, council members want to direct somebody on behalf of the council to speak to a specific bill, when that's done, you can, when that decision's made, you could specifically identify who at that time will do it. So I think there's a range of options. My view would be that there's not any specific need under the bylaws to designate somebody at this time, although there might be good policy reasons to do it if board members, council members think so.
So if I could repeat what I think I heard, within the current structure of the bylaws, the council could pass a motion to authorize the chair or any other member of the council to testify on their behalf. Is that correct?
I think that's right.
I mean, we've done it in the past, so if either we were illegal in the past or it's still possible. I understand the need to clean things up, but potentially I don't know if that's a pressing need today because we're towards the end of the session, or at least the bills are winding down. And I'll repeat the original point. the legislative committee is a dog without teeth or bark or anything else, if they don't have the ability to do anything. And it's essentially I don't want to use the term useless, but it has a form with no function in its current structure.
Doug and all, I do have a question about that. So there's official testimony, and then there's when legislators or others reach out to Stoyan and others regarding feedback on the bills. And I think those are two, my understanding is that those are two separate categories, and Stoyan is authorized to provide specific feedback on bills or legislation as to how that would affect the Building Code Council. That's currently legal, right?
Yeah, well, yes, there's times when legislative members or Ann Larson, the political affairs for DES or whomever will ask for the director to testify. Then that occurs. But as I think our AG pointed out, the DES and the council may or may not always agree. There's been times when, frankly, we don't agree, and so as what Stoyan does as an employee of DES is not always 100% in alignment with his role as the executive director of SBCC. That's been a bit of a point of contention since the legislation occurred in 2018, and hasn't really reached a strong point of contention, but it certainly could.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in again, appreciate you indulging me. Yeah, there's a little bit of tension, right, in the statute on that. I wanted to zero in on that distinction that was made between testifying on behalf or taking a position on behalf of the council on the one hand, and offering technical support to legislative staff or to legislators. It's pretty common bread and butter work that a state agency will do. I don't see anything in the bylaws that addresses the question of who should run point, if anyone, for the council. If a member, for example, or a legislative staffer needs some background on an issue. Generally speaking, that would be done at the staff level. And my view is that there's a motion wouldn't necessarily need to be made to support that, but I think that is a key distinction in the type of interactions that we're talking about here.
Council Chair, this is Todd.
Yes, Todd.
Related to that question, and I do think it's a good point, Shell, is, as a former state employee, very common or very, used to informing as a state employee, legislation, the kind of question you're talking about, which is similar to, in my understanding, asking Stoyan or someone on staff from the agency. But I think there is a different question on if a technical expert that is on the State Building Code Council is perhaps asked to inform as opposed to take a position for the commission. And I'll just use Chell, for example, the question on insulation, right? Chell as Energy TAG chair has knowledge on that would be informative to perhaps a legislative committee. So is there a distinction between staff and a council member making, informing a committee?
Well, if that's a legal question, I would say, it depends. Unfortunately, as a lawyer, that's the first thing we learn in law school, right? To say it depends. Conversations with staffers or with legislators, of course, can take on a life of their own, right? So we would always need to be careful. And what you're touching on there, Todd, are questions regarding potential PDC reporting requirements. It can get a little challenging. The PDC, the Public Disclosure Commission, regulates lobbying, and anytime anybody for the council, anybody is taking a position on a legislative issue, that is a position, not providing technical background information, but taking a position on it, it is technically lobbying and it could implicate PDC regulations. Now, I'm not saying that to alarm anybody, but that's part of just the legal framework of engaging with the legislature. So you need to be pretty careful and transparent about who's doing what and why they're doing it and what they're doing. But generally, legally speaking, there shouldn't be any distinction between technical support or assistance to the legislature coming from staff on the one hand or a council member on the other. I hope that was clear and not too rambling. I tried to pack a lot into that.
Okay, so we're kind of back to what do we want to do today? Do we want to just let it go? Do we want to give someone the authority going forward for this session? Or just deal with it if something comes up? And just to clarify, the staff or Stoyan would be authorized to any input, technical input or clarifications to the legislature. Is that correct?
I was approached by Senator staff once, and I asked Ann Larson for permission to speak with this person, and the questions were technical, related to the building code, wasn't related to the position that the council had. So for this session, so far, only once.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with doing that and not having any action today?
I'm fine with that, Diane. If you need me to remove my motion to allow you to testify on our behalf, then so be it. But if folks feel that motion is needed for Diane to be able to testify if necessary, then I'll let it stand.
Okay, the motion is on the table. Is there a second to that? Okay, I think we have the answer. So we'll just let it stand for now without my authority to do anything further. And we'll just let Stoyan clarify, answer questions, technical questions going forward until we want to readdress this issue. Okay, that's good. Good discussion. Thank you. So we'll move on, and we kind of got ahead of ourselves. Well, I got ahead of myself. I would like Stoyan to introduce, and if there's any additional questions, Derek, our new Assistant Attorney General.
Well, I will let Dirk introduce himself. He prepared a short speech, I guess.
I did not. You've already put me to work today. I don't know if I need an introduction. You probably heard enough from me already.
And you did it very well.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if everyone would agree, but kind of thrown into the fire. I don't mind at all. I'm been just to let folks know. I am new to the Attorney General's office, but it's not my first time in the AGO. I first joined the Attorney General's office back in 2006 in the Education Division and represented primarily all education clients, but primarily the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. Also represented some boards, community college boards at the time. My favorite being Grays Harbor County, or Grays Harbor Community College down in Grays Harbor County. The reason for that is my wife is from Aberdeen. Her father is my father-in-law is a builder from down there, so we have a lot of interest in the work of the council, and really excited to have an opportunity. Well, I should say, before I tell you how excited I am to have an opportunity to support the work of the council, I was in the Education Division for 7 years, ended up becoming general counsel for OSPI, and then I moved in-house. So I represented, I shouldn't say represent, I worked for OSPI as the chief legal officer for 7 years. So I have experience working both on the client side and on the lawyer side, representing. I returned just a few weeks ago back to the AG's office, where I will be representing DES, WATEC, and of course the council. Now I get to tell you about how I'm excited to support the work of the council. I see my job as attorney to help all of you be successful with the work that you want to do. Sometimes there are legal rules that can create some questions or challenges. in the short run limitations on what we want to do as a council. And my job is to help figure out what those are and figure out ways to make you successful as you deal with that. And so I want to see you all to see me as a resource to help support you in the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
So as everybody knows by now, he's taken Dave's place. So we welcome you and look forward to a wonderful year. So having said that, Todd, would you like to, would you like to do the legislative report?
I will, thank you. And I'm going to look to Stoyan also for the help. So I'll give a little characterization to the work of the committee, and I invite any other committee member to add any flavor to it if there's any unintentional bias. In general, as we've said this year, a lot of the bills are tangential, I would say, to a lot of our work, and Stoyan will give a summary on bills that are already dead out of committee. February 15th was the cutoff date within the Committee of Origin for these bills, and this is the week where they move through the fiscal committees with a cutoff date of February 22nd. So when you see a bill is dead, that means it did not make it out of the first committee. Being tangential, the characterization that I would give is there's a lot of activity this year that relates to the Growth Management Act, and while that's not specifically under the purview of life safety, codes. There will be some impacts, and you'll see in the last column there impacts on stakeholders. So when we discuss as a committee and monitor these bills, there's specifically what it would mean on resources and specific action of the staff and the council, the second to last column, and then more of a discussion of what it might mean to stakeholders that we all represent on this commission. So again, many of the bills, while they're related to growth management, specifically related to perhaps climate change, there are quite a few references then to energy efficiency. There are quite a few bills that are related to affordable housing and housing types, and specifically AMI, levels of affordability, AMI, and again, specifically not related to code, but relevant as we think through especially energy code. And many of the same arguments for and against, in testimony for the energy code, those are heard in these committees on growth management considerations. So with that, I think Stoyan, maybe we'll look to you, please, for a summary of the active and then an overview of the dead bills, please.
Yeah, before I get into the detail with the specific bills, I want to clarify a little bit the impact on stakeholders. Keep in mind that many of these bills, they are amending an existing law. So when you see impact on stakeholders, if it's major or uncertain, well, it was the impact that the existing law had on the stakeholders. Some of these bills may have additional impact, and some of these bills will just keep the what was done already. So when you see again major impact, it's not necessarily that the new bill is creating additional impact. And the first bill you see in this table and this log, it's HB 1084, which is Healthy Homes and Clean Building Act. So this is what the informal name is. And what we started with when the bill was introduced, it changed the statute, again, existing statute, to require 60% reduction in net energy consumption by 2027 and eliminate the on-site fossil fuel combustion for space and water heating. So the existing date is 2031 and the new date was 2027. So this would create additional impact on stakeholders and additional impact on the council, because we had to do the work, the council had to do the work, and the staff also 4 years, one cycle earlier. So this was the additional impact. However, when the bill was modified, the substitute bill didn't have this date. So what happened, it restored the current law requirement for 2031 state energy code. And here we have the major impact that was already again in the existing bill, in the existing law, but there is no new impact on the stakeholders and the council. If this helps to clarify how subjective is this impact on stakeholders. The last action with this bill was on February 17th. So there was a public hearing and I will update this table for the next Ledge Committee meeting, but this is the last information that we have for this bill. And I also needed to specify that we started with 20 plus bills, and a few of those, they were misassigned and didn't really had anything to do with the council business. And currently we have 7 bills that are alive. Everything else is dead because it passed the cutoff date. However, any of these dead bills can be woken up, can become alive. So we will monitor even the dead bills. The second bill I have here is HB 1103, and it has a companion bill also in the Senate. This is related to building materials and requires building materials used for government-funded projects to be rated by the contractor for environmental and for environmental costs. So when you read the bill, there is no direct requirement for the State Building Code Council. It doesn't have any impact on the State Building Code Council. And again, the impact on stakeholders is subjective, but based on the discussion we had during the Ledge Committee meeting, the committee members consider that it will have a major impact on stakeholders. Again, it's not related to the State Building Code Council. The council has no tools to make changes to this law.
Historian, this is Todd. Just quick update there. The bill summary seemed to be slow to updating, but it did pass out a capital budget yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, and it was referred to appropriation. So you don't have it on your, you don't have it in this document. I updated it last night. And so my document has the updates and your didn't because it was posted on the website a couple of days ago.
Thank you.
It was too late last night to repost it. So the last meeting yesterday and the bill was referred to appropriations. The other one is the fluorinated gases, HB 1050. It was modified 2 times, and I was having really hard time to evaluate and analyze this bill, but I will share what I found in the last version of the bill. It requires the council to solicit input from affected parties prior to adopting rules addressing substitutes, refrigerants, and refrigeration systems or AC systems. And I know this seems like a additional load, but this is what the council does, and this is what the staff does as part of our regular business. And the other thing that is on the council is that the bill requires the council to adopt rules that allow the use of low global warming potential, so-called GWP, substitutes to the maximum extent practicable, and this is very important, to the maximum extent practicable, whatever that means, but only if the substitutes do not present a risk to building occupant safety or conflict with the fire code or best practices to reduce the risk. And I took it directly from the bill. So the final outcome with this is the council may adopt rules that allow the use of substitutes that are not yet approved by the EPA. It gives the council an additional option. And again, this bill was difficult for me to analyze and read, and there is some history to it. But as a final outcome, we didn't find any impact on the council because changes to the mechanical code that this bill requires the council to do can be done during the standard 3-year code cycle process. Of course, there is impact on stakeholders. Again, it's subjective. If you ask 10 people, you may have 9 different opinions, but it was based on conversation that we had during the LEDGE committee meeting. The next one is House Bill 1287. It was a modified one, so we have a substitute on that bill. What it does, in summary, currently we are working on a rule for updated requirements for electric vehicle charging. And the language in this bill is a little bit vague as I see it, but what it says is the council electric vehicle infrastructure requirements for buildings must exceed the minimum requirements established in 2019, which is the rule that we're working on now, that is under development, if I can say that, for residential and commercial buildings to the extent necessary to support anticipated levels of zero electric vehicle use. And the council must adopt these rules to implement these electric vehicle infrastructure requirements by July 1st, 2024, which you can see that this can be done during the regular code adoption cycle. And when the bill was amended, there was a new text added to it that specifies the rules adopted by the council may be periodically updated thereafter. So it's after July 1st, 2024. It doesn't require the council to do that, but it specifies that the rules may be updated. So impact on stakeholders, it's really uncertain because of the structure of the state of Washington. The difference, for example, I can mention that it will be the impact in the city of Seattle versus the impact in a rural area or a mountain area. So different needs, different feelings about these new requirements. Regarding the impact on the council, there is no impact on the council again because the date July 1st, 2024 allows the council to adopt a potential rule during the regular rulemaking cycle. It doesn't need emergency rule. It doesn't need anything different. House Bill 1329, it's related to public meetings, and this is the Washington State Open Public Meeting Act. There are some amendments, which is, in summary, the COVID, problem with the COVID, the pandemic, and how we run our meetings. And we've been doing that. I know I'm new in the process, but we do everything on Zoom now, and everything we do is already, we are already doing it. It's the bill won't change anything. So this is why you have no impact on the council, no impact on stakeholders. HB 1184, this one was a little bit difficult to swallow because it had an effective date, July 1st, 2022, which seems unrealistic because it's too close. And there are some issues, there may be some issues with cross connection, cross contamination. What this bill is about, it requires the Department of Health to consult how it's written to consult and coordinate with the State Building Code Council when developing rules related to on-site non-potable water systems. And there is not any specifics in the bill. So when Richard was here at that time and he helped me with the fiscal impact, so when we were the impact on the State Building Code Council, we ended up with fiscal impact above $60,000 because, you know, the bill again, in the way it was written, required some additional council meetings and TAC meetings and maybe a few additional hearings, additional rulemaking process, again, based on the date of July 22. And what happened, Ann Larson helped with coordination with the Department of Health. So I didn't speak with anybody, but we exchanged a few emails, and I have it in the table right here below the bill. And this is a summary of the emails, but the information I got from them was that their intent, this related to their intent, the inclusion of the council is a holdover from the original bill. So it's a few years ago. And it's not something that the Department of Health was really trying to involve the council in something bad. And what I got as information is that the focus was on the treatment side and the design of the treatment systems, monitoring and reporting of the treatment systems, not in the building code. So the Department of Health was already working on this, and they needed the council just for coordination, but they didn't intend to require the council to do anything in the plumbing code. Of course, it may require some amendments, but not that major overhaul as it was the initial intent or the initial expectations. So for this bill, you will see impact on stakeholders, yes, and impact on the bill on State Building Code Council above 60,000. But if I have to change it now, I would put uncertain on both. The next one, HB 1157, is related to the housing supply. It was modified once. And what it does, it increases the housing supply through the Growth Management Act and housing density tax incentives for local governments, and the council have nothing to do with it. It's yes, it's a housing supply, but it doesn't cite the council. It doesn't require the council to do anything. And everything down is several, 10 bills that didn't pass the February 15 date. They are all dead. Again, we will continue to monitor the bills because some of these bills may become alive again. And the example is if we have a bill in the House that is going forward, and we have a Senate we have a Senate bill that companion bill actually that is dead, then this companion bill may wake up again. Okay, I think I'm done with my review. And if you have questions, I'll try to answer.
Okay, thank you, Stoyan. And I think the only one to note in the dead bills would be obviously House Bill 1150, which was regarded our 4 legislative members. But
oh yeah, including that. Yeah, I forgot to mention that there were 3, I think, or 4 important bills among these dead bills with impact on the council. But so far, if you want me, I can spend a little time on those bills. But since they're dead, I didn't share any details for it.
yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to point that one out in case it came back. So, okay, thank you. Any questions then for Stoyan? Otherwise, we'll hand it back to Diane, please.
All right, we do need a motion to approve the legislative report.
I guess I can make a motion to approve. Todd?
As Chair, I'll second that motion.
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We'll put that on file. It's great going forward, and we'll just, we have a couple, 2 more legislative meetings, or 3 more, Todd?
I was gonna say at least 2, right? Yeah.
Okay. We'll just keep carrying on. All right, we are down to item 6, and this is the Technical Advisory Group progress reports. And what I would like to do is I put this on the agenda because I would just like to give just a status. You don't have to go into details about every item that you're reviewing on the codes. We'll start with the IBC, and just kind of give us an idea where you're at with that, and if anybody has any questions on it. So Andrew?
Sure, thank you, Diane. So we've gone through most of the chapters here in the IBC. As you can see, we've got chapter 11 left, which is a big chapter. And then we have a couple other chapters that have gone through that, you know, we had to go back to just because, you know, we had questions or we weren't quite finished with them yet. So, you know, we're chugging along quickly. We've gone through all the state amendments. We will soon go through all the changes between the 2018s and the 2021 code. And, you know, we will be finished on schedule.
Hey, Andrew, I can't see the screen right now. Is anybody else seeing some strange stuff?
Yeah,
yes.
Hang on, just getting it. It's not cooperating.
How's that?
There it comes.
There we go.
Yep,
There.
thanks.
So, yeah, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer, but yeah, otherwise that's where we are.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Moving
Thank
along.
you.
Great. Okay, then we'll move on to the fire code. And Tony, you're on here, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, there you go. You want to just give us an update?
Absolutely. So mine's going to sound a lot like Andrew's. We've been moving right along with the state amendments, and we're just about complete with those, withstanding 2 chapters. I believe 11 may be one of our chapters as well that we're still going over. We'll be soon going over the significant impact review. That'll start this week. Despite being a little bit behind because of the pandemic and all that stuff, our TAG has done an excellent job in being efficient and staying on top of things. So we've made some good progress and we're moving right along.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, you have a lot on your plate, both regards. So, okay, well, that's good for the update. Then we'll move on. The last item is we need to establish a timeline for the 2021 Group 1. Okay, so for the timeline for submittals, and Stoyan, I'm going to ask you to step in and kind of give us some background on what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, with the timeline, there was a timeline that I believe Richard developed, Richard put together, and compared to the timeline, again, I'm new with this here, but compared to the timeline that the council was following and the council staff, the last code adoption cycle, it seems like we're about 2 months behind, because what happened, instead getting the ICC codes in September, as we were expecting, we got the codes in December, and even we received the energy code in the first week of February, I believe. And so we couldn't keep up with the existing, with the current timeline that was established. You see the highlighted areas. So originally, we were expecting on the regular meeting in January to review the TAC reports, again, the complete reports, and establish a submission period for the new statewide amendments. And the desired date was January 15, and March 15 was the closing date. But we, as you see, we can't do that, and we will be lucky if we can. We'll complete the TAC reports for the fire code and the building code by the next meeting in March. And Krista is working really hard on the energy code. So our goal is to have the reports for the next meeting in March. But again, you see the dates here and where we are right now. We are about 2 months behind. So you don't need to vote on this. It's just here to show you where we are.
Great. Okay. So I think we're doing pretty well. We're
Council,
staying on track,
Council
considering.
Chair, this is Todd. The Tsunami TAG members have a question on when we might know when Group 2 proposals would be due in this new format.
That would probably be a year from.
Yeah,
April.
so we're
Year
not
from
starting
April.
those till
Year from April.
fall.
Should we assume a full year?
I would say a year from April.
Okay.
But Stoyan, does that sound correct to you? Sorry, I stepped in there.
No, good.
Yeah.
Well, it seems April is a little late, but I don't have correct information for you. It's just we guess we can do it on that date, but to me personally, it seems a little late. But it also depends, how we will, I hope, succeed with Group 1.
But we can confirm that they will not be due with Group 1 proposals.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is Micah. I have another question. Could you indicate when we voted to open accepting petitions for the changes? Per our WAC rule 5104020, item number 3, the State Building Code Council is required to determine and post the time period that they will accept petitions for state amendments. I don't remember us voting on that. And when are we going to open that time frame, and when is that time frame going to end?
And you didn't vote on it because the TAC reports for the Group 1 codes, these reports are not done, and we're not done with the work. So I
understand that, but there still should be a timeline for petitions, even if the TAG works aren't done. They don't have to review those petitions, but you should be able to, or we should be able to accept those during a timeline.
Our goal is April 1st, June 1st. And my understanding was that we need to complete the reports first, and then the council can vote on the time for accepting the petitions.
So we're looking at June.
So
did you say
April
June 1st?
April 1st, June 1st.
April 1st to June 1st. So that's only going to leave the tags a shorter timeline to review the proposals.
If we have everything ready for the next TAC meeting, even if we're not ready with the energy code, we'll have better idea where we are with the energy code. So April 1st, June 1st is the date, a reasonable date. If we can do it a week or two earlier, we will set a different date.
Okay, I guess I still have a question to the TAG chairs. Do the TAG chairs feel that that's an adequate timeline for you to review all the state proposals for petitions for amendments and get those back to the council? I know last cycle we did have a big rush at the end to try to get everything done, and we had the full timeline last cycle, and now here we are extending the timeline out a couple of months for submitting the proposals, but that means that your work is going to have to be expedited in order for the council members or the council to vote on the proposed changes by November to get those through the legislative cycle, if I remember, or the end of November.
It's not going through the legislative cycle this time. We still have the Group 2 to deal with, so it won't be November this year.
I'm at a loss. Why, am I missing something? We've changed our process?
Well, no, from last time, we spread it out, and so we'll do the group 1 and then the group 2 will follow in the fall. We won't even get started, and so it'll be into next year, and then.
But per the bylaws and RCWs, we're not supposed to start group 2 until group 1 is complete. I guess I'm not following along. And maybe our new Attorney General could assist in some of this in the future, but this was not the process we went through last cycle. So that's why I'm not understanding the change in process.
Okay, so we will have the group 1 completed when the group 2 starts. We do have the amount of time in there. And if we get the report in March, we'll have enough time to set that timeline for the submittals for the amendments.
Micah, I'm not unaware of the time crunch that the energy code tag will be under. I'm
Well,
under
I think
no
also the
illusion
energy
that it will be.
code is group 2, correct?
No, the commercial is going on now. We're talking about residential in group 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so the commercial energy code is tag is gonna be under a lot of pressure to meet, for our 20 or 30 or 40 hours in the spring after the deadline for submitting proposals, and we expect a great number of proposals as we've had each year for each cycle. So I can be optimistic about it. Realistically, it will take at least 2 months to get through the energy code proposals after the submission deadline. And then it still goes to the MVE committee and then the Building Code Council for review. But we don't necessarily need to get it all approved by the end of November because it doesn't go into effect immediately the following year, but understood about group 1 being finished before group 2 need to start.
And that's fine. I totally get where you're coming from. I just think that we're not following the required RCWs, but I could be mistaken, as I seem to be quite often. Thanks.
What I have, and I believe this is what happened in the last code cycle. And again, I wasn't here, and my judgment and information I'm sharing with you is based on documents and archive we have. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. But what I have here is that as a guide, the TAC makes and I will skip the beginning of the process, but since we are evaluating the existing amendments right now, what I have is that the TAC makes a recommendation addressing which state amendments should be eliminated. Again, because of the new addition of the code that may address these existing amendments to a standing committee made up of council members. The standing committee then either accepts the TAC recommendations or modifies them before making recommendations to the full council. The council then votes on which amendments will carry forward and then formally requests anyone who has an interest to submit code change proposals to the model code and amendments being carried forward. So this is why if we follow this, we need to complete the tax needs to complete the tax reports, and the council needs to vote and then establish this submittal process. This is how I understand it, what happened the last code cycle. And again, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'm just reading what I found here.
And that's fine with me. I have no issues. I think we were going through the proposals at the tag levels last cycle while petitions for changes were being sent into the Building Code Council staff. So that's why I'm not understanding the change in the process. And if we're changing the process to follow this outline, that's fine. It's just different from my understanding from last cycle.
And, and we can't even start the process till the model codes come out, and they were a little late. So it puts us on the fast track. However, we have spread out the group 1 and group 2, so that's given us more time to deal with it. So, okay. Well, since we don't have to establish that today, we'll move on.
Council Chair, this is Todd.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm afraid I intended to put a tsunami take update on the agenda. Would you entertain adding a 1-minute update here, or otherwise I could also do it under other business?
You know, that would be great. We'll just, because you're kind of under the IBC, so we'll just slip you in under that. Go ahead.
There's a good loophole. Thank you. Okay. A quick update for the council. The tsunami tag has completed its emergency rulemaking, as you know, and voted on it. Thank you. In the process of starting to close it out, the tsunami tag members requested one last meeting, primarily as a courtesy update. This tag is an ad hoc tag. It primarily consists of deep technical experts that are not familiar with the rulemaking process. So we propose this to have one last meeting, explain to them how emergency rulemaking goes into permanent rulemaking for the 2018 code, and then give that group some guidance as they intend to stay together outside of the State Building Code Council, outside of the tag, to continue and develop a proposal for the 2021. And because of their change in the IBC, it falls under Chapter 16, Group 2. So that is also relates to my previous question on when that petition or proposal would be due. So that's the update. Unless there's any pushback on closing this tag out, that is the intent, to close it after one more meeting.
Do you have a date set yet?
I don't believe we do. Do we?
I will be working with you after this meeting, Todd, for that date.
Okay. Okay.
And
Thank you.
On another point of that, the CR 102 for permanent rulemaking was filed this week for that tsunami tag.
Okay.
For that
Great.
tsunami. So we're starting the process.
You know, and maybe I'll add one more piece of information there. The reason that group is going to continue, it has strong representation, of course, from DNR, which was the initial catalyst to do this, because of their generation of modeling and maps of tsunamis. And so in this, they feel they can continue on and improve both the language and those reference maps, and would like to see that be included in the 2021 amendments. So thank you.
Great. Okay, and I've made a note to myself that make sure and put you on the agenda or at our next meeting to give an update, since that's why you're meeting again.
Okay, thank you.
So I won't forget you next time. Okay, let's move on to item number 7, and we're going to go through this, and I don't think it'll take a long time, and then we're going to take a little short break, so everybody knows that. Item 7 is codifying HB 2701, and there's a draft proposal, and then a legal interpretation, and I think Ray's going to take it, right?
Yeah, I think Tony Doan, the chair of the fire tag, and I will work in conjunction on this.
Okay, Tony, you're still there, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
I feel that the wording might be a little funny for what we're going to propose here, but in the agenda. But Tony, I think I'll let you take the lead, and if you need me, I'll jump in. I think you had something prepared for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So to meet the legislative mandate, the fire tag unanimously decided that a notification was best instead of an amendment in this case. And so as far as codifying HB 2701 or coming up with a draft proposal to put into the amendment, that is not the direction that the tag has taken. And then there's a few different reasons for that. If you look at the House Bill 2701 and you look at what was asked of the State Building Code Council in section 4, it says that the State Building Code Council shall work in conjunction with the Director of Fire Protection to coordinate the implementation and enforcement of sections 2 and 3, excuse me. The Director of Fire Protection in this case is our Washington State Fire Marshal through the State Patrol's office. When we reached out to them and worked with them on this, it was their take, because of the way this was worded, this House bill, that this was really more of something that would fall onto the local AHJ and not something that would be governed at the state level. The RCW goes into effect on July 1, and being that it was an RCW, It didn't go through the rulemaking process like a WAC normally would. As you look through sections 2 and 3 of this House bill, there are multiple sections that refer to the local authority and using the local authorities ordinance or municipal code, if you will, to basically carry out what this House bill is asking. Because of that, the notification is the route we want to go versus putting anything in the amendment. And being that the legal interpretation is on the agenda, and we have our Assistant Attorney General here who has been kept very busy during this meeting, and Ray being in the room, I'm more than happy to hear from them as far as whether I was able to interpret that correctly or not.
Tony, oh, go ahead.
Ray, sorry, just to clarify before we put Dirk under the bus again, the question for him was what the council is required to do. So there were different opinions regarding the effective date with some other issues, but I want to clarify that. For the effective date, July 1st, 2021, one opinion was the council need to coordinate and for the enforcement and implementation. So one opinion was we needed to adopt something in the fire code. And the other opinion was that the effective date was the effective date for this law, but it doesn't require the council to do anything right now. This is what we started with, and then I will refer to Ray and Dirk if he has something to say.
Yeah, thank you, Stoyan. The kind of what I'm going to kind of go off of what Tony said. The process is notification to the industry. We're going to put something on our website that this RCW is implemented on July 1, 2021. That keeps the State Building Code Council protected, that they're living up to their requirement of the legislative mandate. Now, because it's a legislative mandate, if we feel that we do need an amendment, this can be done in off-cycle rulemaking. So right now we're making sure that we're meeting the requirements of the House bill. And then if we decide that we actually do need an amendment in the code, we can do that with off-cycle because it's a legislative mandate.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But for now, you've determined that we're just going to put the notice out?
I typed up a letter. I wanted to share, but we worked with the State Fire Marshals or the State Fire Marshal's office with Washington State Patrol. I put their name in the letter, so I sent an email getting approval for their name to be on that letter before I sent it out, and I haven't got a response back yet. So that's why I didn't post anything. I wanted to make sure anybody who was listed on that letter approved of the letter that was being going out. But it will be posted on our website, and it's just a quick thing, notice to stakeholders or industry that this law is going into effect on July 1, 2021, and then listing the RCW.
Because my name came up a few times, jump in. I don't have anything to add to that. Tony and Ray and Stoyan, I think, spelled out the issues pretty clearly. The TAG and staff determined that the best option here is to move forward with providing notice prior to the effective date of the statute is July 1st. I think it's an entirely reasonable interpretation of the new bill. There's no mandate in the bill that the council undertake any rulemaking, and I don't see any immediate need to do so.
Thank you. What would determine if we needed to move ahead with off-cycle rulemaking?
Yeah, my view would be if there's a conflict, certainly between the current code, the current rules, and the statute, you'd want to move forward with making some changes there. You could consider doing that through expedited rulemaking. Alternatively, though, if there's and this is more of a business reason, I would, if you're hearing from stakeholders that there's utility to having it into the code, how our customers, of course, like to have it all in one place. And if there's requirements, with regard to campers and fire systems that they need to be aware of, aware of and it's not in the code, there might be, again, a business reason to put it in. That would be another consideration that I'd offer.
Okay.
And Tony, I might add one more thing and you can add on it. The hardest part about writing an amendment to this House bill was the House bill, we had more questions than we had answers, as far as there was places that we were to enforce monetary fines, and it was supposed to, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it delegated to go to an account that doesn't even exist yet?
Yeah, it was supposed to go to an account through the state fire marshal's office, through the state patrol. And when we coordinated with the state fire marshal's office, they were very unsure what that would look like or how that money would come in or where it would even settle. And so there's just a lot of questions with no answers right now on this bill.
Yeah, if I can jump in real quick, again, the effective date of the bill is July 1st. So before any of that money comes in, there's going to have to be inspections that take place right at the local level. And then there's going to have to be determinations of noncompliance. And then there's going to have to be civil infractions that are, adjudicated. And so it could take some time before there's any dollars coming in under this bill.
And there's a lot of, the Fire Marshals Association thought it, or the Fire Marshal's Office thought of it, and the building industry thought of it, that it seems like there's a lot of unfunded mandates in this bill.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's true. That's another problem.
yeah. And that's all I had on that.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Is there any public comment on this? Okay, since we're.
Yes.
Oh,
Actually, I'm sorry. I had you muted. I've got a public comment. It's Michael Abrams. I'm work for Jensen Hughes Fire Protection Engineering firm.
okay.
Comment on the technical aspects of this House bill, specifically starting on line 32 on page 2. It says that certification from an international certification board as a fire life safety 1 or fire smoke damper technician through a program accredited by American National Standards Institute under ISO, IEC. There is no such accreditation. There is no,
More questions.
they do not have that, and implementing that type of accreditation would be extremely difficult to do. We're probably talking years, to be honest with you.
The tag, I'll speak for the tag, if Tony doesn't mind, but we agree. There were things in the bill that we didn't know what they were either.
Yeah, so the International Building Code, Washington State Building Code, has very defined criteria for a special inspector. Essentially, smoke control systems need to be inspected by a special inspection agency, similar to structural steel, concrete, spray-on fireproofing. All of those things have to be inspected by an independent special inspection agency. That applies to a new building. The Washington State Fire Code specifically states that smoke control systems need to be inspected. It varies on the type of smoke control system, but it's either annually or semi-annually. They don't define what the criteria is of the special inspection agency. However, the International Building Code says the special inspection agency must have qualifications in fire protection engineering, mechanical engineering, and air balance. Now, I don't know of any entity that has all of those has that expertise. So usually it's a team approach where one entity takes a lead and the others work for that entity. That's how it's done for new buildings, and the same process would need to take place for existing buildings. Generally, because smoke control primarily involves extensive code knowledge, the fire protection engineer is the lead entity. It's not just dampers. You need to know what type of damper based on a fire rated. Is it a fire rated wall? Is it a smoke barrier, smoke partition? There's a whole lot involved in that. There are other jurisdictions. I've worked in probably a couple hundred that do have specific guidelines for, would be called smoke control recertification. They've adopted it, but, and actually I was contacted by ANSI this week about what it would take to get a certification. And they admitted this is just way beyond of what we can implement. On top of that, there are very few individuals, there's not a lot of demand for special inspections like concrete, structural steel, welding, etc. So you're probably talking maybe 100 people nationwide that they would certify. There's a huge cost in implementing a program to certify 100 people. So that where I'm going on this is that I think this needs to be rewritten as far as qualifications. My recommendation is that the respective authority having jurisdiction, the fire department, defines that qualifications, or maybe just go back to what's in the International Building Code and said, these are the qualifications of a special inspector. We're not talking just testing. These have to be inspected.
Yes, I would agree. There was a House bill on the floor this cycle that didn't go through, that loosened up the requirements for that inspector. This was a little unique. It's an RCW. It's not a WAC. So our hands are kind of tied on what we can and can't do. It's got to go through a legislative floor to make any changes. It's a different entity than, I mean, we work with RCWs, but this was a little bit different entity than we're used to dealing with.
If it doesn't have the capability of being implemented, it doesn't serve any real purpose. You're not going to get an international certification board. ANSI just doesn't have that capability. So my recommendation is that we strike that.
Council Chair, if I may, this is Tony.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Abrams, we completely understand your position on this. The problem is that where it's being presented today at the State Building Code Council level, we don't have the ability within this council to change this RCW. It has to go through legislation to do so. And so what we're addressing today is just what the State Building Code Council was tasked with. I can assure you that your concerns are lining up very closely to what the Fire Technical Advisory Group has already expressed. It's just that in order to get the changes done that you're requesting, it has to be done at a different level.
Then I would suggest doing it at a different level, because this, you can pass this bill, it can be mandated, but it can't be implemented.
Understood, Mr. Abrams. We understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that. Yeah, our hands are kind of tied on this one. It is what it is, and the council can only deal with what we can deal with.
This is Scott Nelson with the University of Washington Environmental Health and Safety. I'm the building fire safety manager for the University of Washington Enterprise. And the question I have is, I was not notified about this bill. However, I was notified about Senate Bill 5360, and it seems that they are concurrent in what they're attempting to do in some regards. And so I'm just trying to get further definition on, are these tied together in some way? Or I'm searching through the bills and I don't see where this one is actually listed.
Are you addressing the NAFED bill, the NAFED certification?
I can provide clarity in that.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you,
So
Simon.
the bill is SB 5360. So what this bill does, it modifies HB 2701 that currently we're talking about. What is the difference? So currently, RCW 1927-720 requires inspections and tests to be performed by contractors or engineers certified. And I don't need to address that again, you guys covered it well. But what the new bill does is it adds individuals meeting the NFPA definition of a qualified person who has received training, and I'm reading from the bill, training equivalent to the NFPA standards for inspection and testing of fire dampers, smoke dampers, combination fire and smoke dampers, and smoke control systems. So this is the addition. This is what this bill was intended to do, to add a different additional option for certification and testing. It had nothing to do with the date. It had nothing to do with what is currently in the law. I was told that there was a push to change the date and modify the current requirements for certification and testing, but the bill didn't pass the cutoff date. So formally, it's dead. It may again wake up again, but as it is shown right now, it didn't pass the committee, so it's dead.
Okay, any other public comments?
Yes, this is Christopher Moy, Guardian Security.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to touch on and sort of piggyback on what Mr. Abrams had to say a moment ago. In regards to that specific section in the House bill, reference that back again, that would have been section 2 and A and B. One of the struggles with the timeline of achieving certification to comply with the bill is that in the beginning of the bill, it states, or in the beginning of the section, it states the International Certification Board is the certification Life Safety 1 and Fire and Smoke Damper Technicians. That specific certification program through ICB, while it may be great, it's limiting private contractors. That specific certification has a requirement on it that you shall be part of a collective bargaining agreement to obtain it. And as Mr. Abrams said a moment ago, there are no other alternative certifications at this time. So at a minimum, I would recommend and request that there be an extension on the enforcement date. And then to further touch upon that, there is direct conflict in the certification and the certification requirements with Washington State code surrounding the NICET 2 requirements for fire alarm. Those requirements for NICET 2 in this world of smoke control has been forgotten. And the certifications that are provided through ICB for the collective bargaining groups allows or disallows or removes the requirement for that NICET 2. So it sort of bypasses some of the important standards that have already been set in Washington State. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we're going to move on since we talked about this. There isn't anything the council can do today. It is an RCW. The fire code tag is dealing with how to get the notice out, or if we have to do an expedited rule. But today, this is where it stands, and there's not anything further we can do on this. We can't modify it. So,
Chairperson Glenn.
If I can have public comment, please.
I'm sorry. Who is that?
This is Brian Thompson with Aegis Engineering. And as far as the council's ability to record public comment, I think I would echo what the Representative Denton Hughes and Guardian Security has said, and add that there are other references in the House bill to compliance with National Fire Protection Association standards rather than the state building code or state fire code. So I think there's a conflict that the State Building Code Council must execute expedited rulemaking to resolve these conflicts. Thank you.
Chairman Glenn.
Yes.
This is John Napier representing Washington State Association of Fire Marshals. I just want to express that our state association made an attempt this legislative cycle, understanding that this RCW needed to be changed at the legislative level. We made an attempt to get the date changed and address many of the systematic problems with this House bill. I think it's important for the viewers to understand that this House bill has been replaced with actual RCW language, and it would be most appropriate to address the existing RCW that's in code and not this House bill. And the last thing actually would be, if anybody would like to partner with our association in addressing this RCW, there are many facets to it, but we have lobbyists and we're very in tune to the problems of this, since we're going to be the ones implementing it at the local level. So I would ask if anybody would like to work and partner with our association, that they reach out to us, and we'll work on this on the off season. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
John, which
John.
association is that again? Would you say?
The Washington State Association of Fire Marshals.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, Stoyan, we don't have to take any action on this, do we, since they're still working on it? What?
No, it's a work in progress.
Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna move on to item number 8, but before, we're gonna take a little break. Let's do 10 minutes. We'll come back at exactly noon. All right, welcome back, everyone. So I'm assuming we still have all the council members. Maybe we could quickly go through just the names. Stoyan, could you just read through the names, make sure we still have a quorum?
Just give me a few seconds.
Okay.
Okay, Diane.
Here.
Andrew. Okay, Leanne.
I am here.
Al. Doug.
Yes.
Okay. Rob Graper.
Yeah.
Did I?
Bob Hamlin, here.
Okay. Tony Don.
Here.
Chill. Chill Anderson, not here yet. Okay. Phil Lemley. Okay. Corey. Caroline.
Present.
Micah.
Yes, present.
Todd.
Bob Hamlin, here.
I didn't hear who. I didn't hear the name.
Bob Hamlin.
Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 council members present.
Stoyan, this is Todd. I think I came in late.
Okay, 9.
This is Joe. I'm here as well.
Okay.
And this is Corey. I'm here as well.
And
Who else?
Andrew, you come back on? We lost Andrew. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 8, and this is request for opinions. We've got 2 to deal with today. The first one is under the WUI code from Valley Regional Fire Authority, and I'm going to have Ray go through. There's multiple questions and answers, and Ray's going to take this one.
Thank you, Diane. Yes, this is from, as you said, Valley Regional Fire Authority. They had some questions or some clarifications. I would like an opinion for the WUI code in section 302. And it looks like part of IFC, the International Fire Code 304 in vegetation. The question number 1 was, do the IFC 304.1.2 vegetation code site apply to neighborhoods? And then it says number one, designation is what wildland urban interface and not designated as wildland urban interface. And the answer to that question number one is if the area is designated as being in the WUI area, it should be in accordance with the WUI code, with the WIC, Woodland Urban Interface Code. And two, you would apply the intent of the code language in the IFC. Do you want me to pause and take any comments for each one, Diane, or do you just want me to read through the whole thing?
Maybe we should, let's see, how many questions?
There's 5.
There's 5?
6, excuse me.
Oh, 6. Yeah, let's just go through the whole thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. All right. Then question number 2 says, does the IFC 304.1.2 apply to live landscaped yards that overhang the fence and are within 10 feet of the eaves of a home not in the area defined as the woodland urban interface? Answer 2, it may. However, your local ordinance would define this as the jurisdictions differ from one to the next. Question number 3. What guidance is there to determine if growth that is capable of being ignited and endangering property? Tony Doan and I worked on this together. This is the commentary of the IFC. It says the commentary in the IFC provides guidance as to dead vegetation and weed growth, but refers to the WUIC for growing vegetation. Accumulations of natural weights such as grass clippings, weeds, growth, and shrubbery cuttings are only unsightly, but also represent a serious fire hazard. All too often, these accumulations occur at or near fence lines that are adjacent to streets or alleys. This makes accidental ignition by a cigarette butt tossed from passing vehicles a good possibility. Common sense tells us that the removal of this kind of waste is beneficial. The rules of nearly all jurisdictions make waste control and removal the responsibility of the building or property owner, his agent or her agent, the tenant or the contractor if the work is being done on the site. Uncontrolled vegetation growth poses substantial risk to areas designated as the woodland urban interface area accordingly, such as must comply with the provisions of the International Woodland Urban Interface Code. Most jurisdictions will cover this in more detail through the ordinance adoption process, as the state and the international model codes are unable to provide specific requirements based on the geographical differences from one locale to the next. Local zoning ordinances are also a common tool used in addressing these specific bullet points. Question number 4. If it is determined that the code is applied to this situation, can the code official require neighbors to mitigate the situation? And if so, what actions would be required? Answer to question 4 is, this would be the decision that needs to be made at the local level based on the interpretations of the IFC and the WUIC, if applicable, and local ordinances. Question 5. If the IWUIC applies to neighborhoods not defined by legislative body as woodland urban interface, if not, what code would be applied to possible live vegetation? At the state level, the answer to number 5 is, at the state level, no. However, this does not keep the jurisdictions from being able to adopt the WUIC at the municipal level. Question number 6. When will the maps be available for the use in King and Pierce County with areas defined by roads and boundaries that can be used to enforce the International Woodland Urban Interface Code, the IWUIC? The answer to number 6 is the maps are currently in the final stages of approval and should be available soon. I just got an email today that said that they're just waiting for the commissioner's approval. So they should be available soon.
All right, thank you, Ray. That's a lot of information, but it's so similar that I thought we should just go through the whole thing. So I'm going to open this up for any public comment on any of the questions, any of the comments, any of the answers.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not hearing any. Then make sure you unmute if you want to speak. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the council, and we do have to take action on this. And so I'm going to open it up for the council comment.
So this is Micah. I agree with most of the question or answers. Answer number 6, I believe those maps are currently available. DNR sent out, I believe, the link to those maps now about 6 days ago. So we may want to revise that question. If Ray, if you need me to send you that link, I can. And then go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I just like at 11:02, I got an email from DNR saying that they're still waiting for the on the commissioner for final approval.
Oh,
They may have maps available, but they're not official maps for the officially adopted.
Excellent.
But yes, if you would send me that, that would be great, because I would love to start giving out the information.
Absolutely. We're looking at addressing some of the issues that came up on the map. So, and then I do have a little bit of concern with answer 3. It seems like the question is about the Wildland Urban Interface Code, and we're providing them with IFC commentary that I don't think is very compatible. It talks about adjacent, fence lines adjacent to streets or alley. A lot of times in Wildland Urban Interface area, yeah, maybe you don't have that, but it's not a big deal. It's just, it just seems an odd way or direction to go. I would think if they're, if we're talking about growth, it seems like our defensible space requirements in the Wildland Urban Interface code would be a better suit, in my opinion, for this question. But I'll leave that up to others to decide. That would be a recommended change. Thank you.
Would you just for clarification, Micah, would you just recommend removing the commentary section and leaving the second paragraph with that?
I definitely think you could leave the sentence referring them to the IFC commentary, and they could have their own takeaway. I don't know if we, as the council should reprint the commentary. I just don't think it applies wholly, in my opinion. But if you and Tony worked on this, I don't want to mess it up too much, but I definitely think that some mention of defensible space and defensible space guidelines would be possibly better for the guidance on, growth in the Wildland Urban Interface area.
Yeah. Council Chair, this is Tony.
Yeah, Tony.
Okay, Micah, that's a good point, and I think the reason it led us to the IFC instead of the WUI on question 3 is because they put in quotation growth that is capable of being ignited and endangering property, which is the exact quote from section 304 of the fire code. And so I think I was under the impression that they were specifically referencing how to apply the vegetation section in the fire code, which is why that's kind of where we started that. But I agree, it kind of bounces back and forth between the WUI and the fire code. And I was under the impression, based on how the question was written, that they were more saying, hey, if this isn't WUI, then how can we apply this section in the IFC? And so I think that's kind of why we got to that point, if that provides any clarification, but totally agree. It's a little confusing there.
That works for me. I think your explanation is good. It is a little confusing, but I think you guys have it.
Okay. I think I'll send it as is, and if they have any questions, they can always write us back.
That sounds great.
Which I think will happen.
So any other comments from council members, questions?
Excuse me, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I am not sure, but as the Mayor Pacific in the jurisdiction of the Valley Regional Fire Authority, I am not sure if I am able to vote on this. So I just wanted to be open and transparent. I sit as a board member for the Valley Regional Fire Authority.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Yeah. So if there's any other comments? All right, so we do need to vote on this opinion. So I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. It's Micah.
I'll second. This is Tony.
Why don't we take a roll call vote? I want to make sure we get the majority, or I mean, the right amount of votes. So Stoyan, would you take a roll call vote?
Yes, yes. Diane?
I don't vote until there's.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Andrew? Leanne? Okay, I got it.
It's appropriate
Yes.
for me to vote.
Yes. Al? Doug?
Yes.
Rob Graper? Tony?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Phil? Okay, he's not there. Corey?
Yes.
Rob Hamlin?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Micah?
Yes, and Ray, I just sent you that link.
Thank you so much.
Todd?
Aye.
Okay. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes.
All right, great. Motion carries. All right, we're on to the next one. And this is from Spokane County, dealing with the 2018 Washington State Energy Code Residential, Section 405. Stoyan, did you want to read this, or did you want Krista? Oh, okay. Shannon's going to do it. Okay.
It's regarding R405 for simulated performance alternative. Question is, would the use of section R405 to show compliance still require the additional energy credits from section R406? The answer is yes. Projects showing compliance with the energy code via the performance method would still need to comply with the appropriate number of credits in section R406.3.
Okay, and before we get into some the comments, I want to give some background on this, because this came up and there's been a lot of activity on this. There's a lot of conversations. This was a little bit confusing in the code. So to give you some background, and I've had a lot of conversations with different people, raters, building officials, builders, and they were kind of asking about this. So Spokane submitted this opinion. And the background on this is that in the 2015 codes, you had different pathways to comply with the energy code. And one of the pathways was the credits. Another pathway was the simulated performance or energy modeling. And then you had the UA trade-off, which is still there. So in this code, the way it was written, it does specify, so section 405 is a simulated performance method, and that's a path of compliance, and which is great. And then, the credits are on the table 406. The table, there's a table 405.2. And so if you do the simulated performance 405, it refers you also to have to comply with this table 405.2, which is the model, the base code, the 401 to 404, which is the base requirements. That's great. Where it got confusing, and I think it kind of threw everybody off, is that it also lists under that table other requirements and refers you back to the table 406, which is the credits. So this question came up because if you're doing the simulated performance or the energy modeling, that was intended to be a standalone. It was a standalone in the 2015, and everybody believed that it was supposed to be a standalone in this code, even though it refers back to the percentage in carbon emissions as opposed to energy efficiency. But what it did was it also put you back to having to also do the credits. So you're doing energy modeling and you're having to do the credits as well. That's the background of all this, how this all came up. And so that's where we're at, discussing this opinion. And so with this saying that, I know there's a number of people that want to speak to this. So I'm going to open it up to public comment, and I'm going to give everybody a chance to speak if they want to. So just kind of call out your name and I'll just take you one at a time. And since we're on Zoom, and then I'll just give everybody an opportunity. So first one, jump in there.
Craig Roberts.
Yeah.
Okay, Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Craig Roberts with Connor Homes in Spokane. Just a little background. I've been meeting with our local building officials once a month since the adoption of the Washington State Energy Codes. And we discuss code changes as well as the energy code to make sure we're all meeting that requirement. And I've asked our building officials several times throughout the year on where we stand as far as efficiency. Are we meeting the goals of the state program? And every time the answer is, we don't know, there's no way to test it. So today with modeling, now that it's available to test a home before the project even gets started, we're able to test the components that we're putting into the home to ensure that we're meeting all of the energy requirements. If the testing, say, comes back and we don't meet the energy efficiency requirements, we as a company can discuss what our options are to put more insulation in the model, see what energy heal trusses do, heat exchanger, et cetera, to make sure we're meeting those goals. The modeling companies also do inspections and testing in various times of the construction to ensure that we're maintaining our goals. At the end of construction, they do a final test, and it provides all of the information showing the building officials that we're in compliance with the new Washington State Energy Codes. So unfortunately, with the current system we have, we're forced to select credits without really any measurable values, which are extremely costly to the consumer, especially in a time where construction costs are at its highest. So I think by using the modeling method, we can assure we're using the best components to meet the energy requirements, and at the same time keeping costs down for our clients, and still while meeting the reduced carbon output and energy efficiency goal of our state. So I thank you for your time. I hope that you would be able to consider the modeling as another option to obtain a building permit for us builders. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Craig, I have a question. This is Charlie Anderson from the Building Code Council. What modeling software are you using to do the modeling?
I'm going to refer you to a company that we actually did some experimenting. Milt, if you wouldn't mind stepping up and giving your presentation on which we used.
For this particular case, we used software called Ecotrope. We also have the ability to use another one that's called RemRate. So there's basically three different softwares that are approved by the United States Department of Energy, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and the IRS. And Ecotrope is one of those three, and that's the one we use.
Okay, thank you.
So Milt, did you have another other information you wanted to share?
Yeah.
A lot of this modeling.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I guess in my opinion, what we have to look at with this is if we go strictly off of credits, then we take away flexibility from the builders. If we go with 405, they have a lot more flexibility in what they're able to do. And ultimately, we reach the goals that were established by the state. So let's say for the sake of argument that Washington says all new cars sold in the state of Washington by 2021 have to be getting 30 miles to the gallon. And 2021 comes along and they're all getting 30 miles to the gallon. But then the state says, oh, by the way, we recognize you reached the goal, but we want to make you put on a special tire, special paint, and put a sail on top just in case you can take advantage of the wind. Those add-ons have nothing to do with reaching the goal, and that's what my concern is with this. So I had a friend that became a power lifter. He wanted to be healthy, he wanted to be strong, and so he started weightlifting. Not that weightlifting is a bad thing, but he lost sight of his goal, which can be bad. He was lifting heavier and heavier, and after a series of injuries and surgeries, he could not lift anymore. In my opinion, energy credits can be a good thing, but the builder has already reached the goal. Is the extra burden worth it? So for every $1,000 that's added onto the price of a house in Washington, approximately 2,500 families are priced out of the ability to buy a house. So we have to look at a lot of different things when it comes to this, but if 405 were to stand on its own, then, you know, if the builder's already made it, why are we asking them to do extra stuff over and beyond what the goal has established for them? So I guess then the question becomes is, so how do we know if the goal has been reached? 405.3 tells us what the goal is. And so for instance, in a house that's 1,500 square feet up to 5,000, you have to show 44% reduction in carbon output. So on one of the houses we tested up there, they had a 48%, and this house was built under the 2015 standards, and that, you know, they didn't do anything special knowing that we were coming to test the house. They just built a real quality house. And we showed that their carbon savings was 40.8%, which is 4.8% better than what the minimum requirement of it was. So the next part to this is are they going to have to put on several thousand more dollars worth of energy credits, even though they've already reached the goal? So basically what happens with the pre-modeling is we take all the factors that go into building the house, the U value of the windows, the R values, the components that are going to be used, the air conditioner, the furnace, all this type of stuff. And we do a pre-model, and then that gives us a score, and that will tell us instantly whether or not that house is going to make the energy credit or make the carbon dioxide increase. So when we do that, we send that paperwork back to the builder, and the builder sends it to the building officials, and all they have to do is look at the carbon savings, and they know whether that house is passed. They don't have to do any extra stuff involved with this. So it makes it real simple for the builder and real simple for the building official. The other part then becomes with when we don't pass, if we have a builder who does not make the minimum requirements, we can go a couple different ways. We can give them some options on how they can pass, or we can tell them, you're not even close, you better go get your 6 energy credits and just call it good at that. So once it's been approved by the building official and construction has started, then we will just come in and do a series of tests just to show that everything's being done the way it's supposed to be, that they're putting in the correct windows, that they're putting in the right furnace, that they're getting the air changes per hour that they were expecting. When all this is done, we will do another model on the house, and then that will confirm that the house was built the way it was supposed to. And we send that back to the builder, and then the builder refers that on to the building officials when they're asking for their permit for occupancy. And it's easy for the building official to say, yeah, you easily made your goal and you're good to go.
So Imelda, I have a question of you, this is Diane. And when we've had discussions on some of your software you're using, all of your ratings that you're doing in the modeling. And so in the code, when it's talking about the simulated performance, it's just taken into account your heating and cooling and water heating. But in your modeling, don't you take into the whole envelope as well? So basically you're covering those credits as if you're getting the credits, but you're doing the modeling on the whole house. Is that correct? I think you're muted.
We also take into consideration the appliances that are put in, the oven, the dishwasher, the lighting that's used, make sure they're not using incandescent light bulbs and all that stuff, all goes into figuring the efficiency of this house. So besides the carbon output, it will also tell us what the energy decrease is. So it's based on the percentage on the scores.
Right, right. That's in the code. Yes, thank you. Other questions or other comments?
Yeah, this is Damon Jeg with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
Yes, Damon.
Great. I just prepared a brief comment. I just want to thank the council, Chair Glenn, and the council members for the opportunity to speak today. The Building Industry Association of Washington represents 8,000 members, over 8,000 members statewide, owner-operated businesses within the building industry. And, today I'm here advocating to support practical paths forward for meeting energy requirements. This request for opinion should clarify that there are multiple pathways to meeting the 2018 Washington State Energy Code requirements. An alternative path of compliance creates new opportunities for creativity when meeting these requirements. It gives builders the freedom to pick and choose how they'll implement HVAC, insulation, and other required components. And we also suggest that the SBCC consider eliminating simulated performance language in the 18 Energy Code and adopt the ICC ERI Index and/or the ASHRAE 90.2. I believe those both will meet the energy standards Washington is looking for. So just thank you for the time to speak today, and hopefully we can get this clarified. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And we can address the 2021 going forward, but 2018 is already, it's already adopted. But thank you.
Yes, I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, though. That's good.
Diane, this is Doug. I have a question.
Yes.
I asked staff, why did they answer the question the way they did? Why do you think that if you meet the performance criteria in 405, that you still have to check certain boxes in 406?
I can answer that question for you. This is Krista. If you go to section R402 or R401.2 compliance, it states that projects shall comply with one of the following. Sections R401 through R404, in addition, dwelling units and sleeping units in a residential building shall comply with section R406. 2, section R405, in addition, dwelling units and sleeping units in a residential building shall comply with section R406. So that's one section that cites it. And if you go to the table in section R405, table R405.2, mandatory compliance measures, that also includes section R406, additional energy efficiency requirements. So we have 2 citations within the code that specifically state that you need to comply with section R406 in addition to R405 when doing the simulated performance alternative.
And Krista, this is Caroline, if I could ask a quick question.
I'm looking at R4, excuse me a second, Krista, follow up. That second section you quoted was R405.2, mandatory requirements, is that correct?
Yes.
I must have an inaccurate or out of date section of the code I'm looking at. It doesn't reference 406 in the one I'm looking at.
Doug, it does in the table, and that's where the confusion came in because it lists under other requirements and it states 406. And I don't know if that was the intention, but that puts you back to the credits.
That was the intent. And actually, the compliance with R406 was required in the 2015 code. And there was a code change in the 2018 to clarify that requirement. And in the 2015, that section R402.1 listed the 2 compliance methods. And then in a separate paragraph, it says, in addition, dwelling units and sleeping units within residential buildings shall comply with section R406. So for this code, they had clarified it and added that sentence to both compliance measures rather than having it as a separate paragraph.
So what is
but
the
it
point?
was intended that that they also comply with R406.
What is the point of an alternative performance criteria if it doesn't have any import to this question? Well, why even have it there?
Yeah, and I think that's why this came up, because they spend a lot of money on the energy modeling to get that pathway accomplished. And a lot of the builders are taking advantage of the tax credits, and you have to be 50% over the code. So if you go that route and you still have to go back to the credits, you're doubling up. And I think that's originally why this came up. It's like, why isn't this a standalone pathway to get there?
This is Chair Anderson. I mean, if you read the code, it's abundantly clear that R406 is required under R405. So I'm not quite sure of the intent of the discussion today. I would love to hear from proponents what the intent is, because we can obviously, under emergency rules, change the code. But I don't know that anyone can really argue that R406 is not in the code required under the path of R405. And I guess I'd be interested in what the pathway for remedy is that any of the proponents of this change are making.
Right, Jill, and just to clarify, thank you for that, because you're exactly right. It is written in the code. And Chris is exactly right. It's written in there, whether the intent is there or not. It's just, why are we doubling up when they're going to the expense of the modeling and their energy modeling package, which the building official can approve this software package, and the way they're doing this modeling, it goes above and beyond the simulated performance in the code. So actually they're taking more elements when they're doing the modeling. So one suggestion, just think about this, council members, when we're going to consider this, is that giving the ability of the building official to accept the energy modeling through these other programs as a standalone option, which goes above the simulated performance in the code. So I would like to hear more public comment, and then of course we might have more questions of the council.
Madam Chair, this is Damon Doyle, a home builder and rater. I would ask, we've included section 407, which allows passive house, which is also a modeling path, to be able to be certified without using table 406. So why would passive house be exempted out and the other modeling software such as Ecotrope or RemRate being mandated to use table 406? Thank you.
Good point.
Can I respond to that? Passive House is an extremely rigorous modeling program and certification, well in excess of the current residential energy code. So it's well above and beyond any of the other pathways that are in the code as a minimum.
This is Gavin Tennell, representing Washington Solar Energy Industries Association. I thought I'd jump in here. I am a certified passive house consultant, and I just want to confirm what Shell stated there. Passive house is the global gold standard for energy efficiency. It's accepted in academia. It's accepted in the European Union. They're often performed. Passive house models are often performed by licensed professionals, energy engineers. It's not something that anyone with a UBI can run. I would testify that is why there is a divergence here in these two code pathways.
So if you're doing one method of passive house, you still have to get the credits. It's only the extreme passive house certification where you don't.
No, Madam Chairwoman, the R405 is not a passive house. It's just something that has an energy model. It's not operated. It's not an energy model that was performed on the PHPP or WFI passive.
No, passive house, the first passive house method does require 406 The second passive house, if you do the Passive House Institute, then you do not.
I don't believe that's how the code is written.
Well, I've got it right in front of me. If it is.
Then you win. Nonetheless, I concur that the passive house minimums far exceed, well, REM rate and Ecotrope don't have minimums, they just simply assign a score. But I've done over 24 net zero energy homes that scored in the low 30s without solar and scored positive energy with solar. The point is that as long as you can hit the intent of the code, which says 56% better than code, then, or excuse me, 44%, then you've achieved the code. To put the mandatory prescriptive checklist in conjunction with that is redundant and destroys the performance pathway. I'll also note that in California, under section or Title 24, which is essentially a net zero code, 90% of all submissions are using a compliance path, not a prescriptive path. So 90% of the homes submitted in California are using a performance pathway.
So this is Todd. A question maybe for Gavin. If one pursues section 407 passive house, does that usually meet the requirements for the tax credits that were mentioned by Council Chair?
R407, which does not require additional energy credits, meets the tax credits.
Always, most of the time?
Always.
Thank you.
And just for clarification,
This is
that would have to be under the passive house option 2, not 1.
Option 3, I believe.
Chair, Madam Chair, could you clarify what you mean by passive house option 1 and passive house option 2?
I will read it in the code. So it gives you 2 pathways for passive house. Let me find it here. Yeah. Hang on. Didn't have that marked. Okay. So if Passive House Institute it complies with the PHILS Passive Building Standard, and that also you have to comply with Table 405.2, which includes the credits. The Passive House Institute, complying with the Low Energy Building Standard, it's a different documentation. It's a you have to list the compliance features in the statement that the passive house certifier that the modeled energy performance is congruent with the plans and specifications, and they have to have a PHI low energy building project certificate. And then you don't have to comply with the 406.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I just want to note that table 405.2 is not what is in question here, I do not believe. I think we are talking about table 406.
No, we're talking about the table 405.2 and other requirements.
Table 405.2 is just a mandatory compliance for simulated alternatives. Both Passive House and ResNet would be simulated models. Table 406 is a consumer check, I guess you could call it, that we are hitting our fuel normalization credits, we are hitting our energy credits, all of which Passive House blows out of the water.
Okay, so we're not talking passive house, but we're talking about table 405.2 is the requirements, which includes 406.
I guess I'm just asking for clarification. It seems like there's still confusion that Passive House needs credits.
Well,
it does not need credits.
The institute that I just read does not, but the first one does. But we're talking about simulated performance method and referring to table 405.2.
This is Henry Odom with Ecotope here.
Yes.
Ecotope has developed and done the statewide energy modeling for the residential code for decades now. And I led the effort last round. And I'd just like to touch on a few points I've heard from various people on this call. And I'd just like to reiterate that we do know where we stand on our target of 70% reduction by 2030. I would recommend everyone review our most recently completed report for the Department of Enterprise Services that has modeled the 2006 baseline as well as the 2018 baseline. The modeling used to develop that report is the same that was used to create the entire R406 energy table. And I can say we're about 40% of the way to our 2030 goals, which means we have 30% left to go, which speaking of heavy lifting, we have a lot to go in front of us. I would emphasize that extensive energy modeling has been done to develop this table. It's been done through regional approved methodology that the state has relied on for years and years. And as far as I can tell, we've included almost every measure that I can imagine being applied to residential homes in R406. And so when I hear people talking about using a model to get measures that make sense to meet the intent of the code, I'm curious what measures are under question there, because I also get a sense that this modeling path that people want to pursue is a way to make homes cheaper. And so I'm just curious how that kind of plays in. As a member of the upcoming TAG, I'm sure we'd all be very interested to see some of these simulated reports and what some of the measures are coming out with and how that meets up with the intent of our code and where we have to be both under 2018 as well as 2021. And I've also recently done a lot of work down in Oregon, helping them meet their newly mandated state goals by Governor Brown. And I can speak from experience that between two energy modeling programs, it's not just the measures you put in, but it's the inputs behind it. It's the number of occupants, it's the hot water draw, it's the lighting loads, it's the appliance loads, plug loads. There's a lot that goes into it. And if we're going to be bringing in new energy modeling software that has not been reviewed or fully understood both by the energy tag as well as building officials, I think that could create a pretty big confusion in meeting code. And so I would recommend that if this was going to be a methodology that builders would like to pursue, that we could come to a general agreement through a more thorough process. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. But just a little clarification on this. We are talking about the language that is already existing in the code. They already have a pathway for the simulated performance that takes into carbon emission. So it's not, we're not talking about anything, adding something new to the code. We're talking about what's already in the code, just for clarification.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Thank you. And I understand that. But I think having that section of R406 included is a way to keep this modeling path more robust and to help prove our measures. That's all I'm getting at.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
I'd just like to make one more comment, if that's okay. This is Gavin, again, over in Spokane, Washington. The California paths came up, and I want to add that California resident raters are actually registered and regulated by the state for their quality control processes. Keeping R406 in this code is a vital public defense to keep this code robust and keep us on track. Getting away from that and abdicating quality control to ResNet could lead to highly underperforming buildings, utility issues with our state's rollout of the Clean Energy Transformation Act, sick building syndrome or worse. I highly applaud and recommend keeping this existing language. Thank you.
I would like to jump in and note a few things. This is Jonathan Jones with the Tri-Cities Home Builders Association.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
The first thing I would like for everybody to understand is that 406.2 is a very prescriptive measure, and we're using it based off of a baseline of 2006 as we're tracking this through Washington State to meet our mandates. If you look at the 405 simulated path, it's actually a simulation path, it's not the ERI path, and that pathway actually limits the input items that are being used. So to truly understand that path, you get zero mechanical savings using that alternative path. The only savings you will achieve by using the 405 are through envelope measures, distribution assistance, system efficiency measures, and air tightness measures. So this is not truly a true performance path. It's not truly a full modeling path either. It is designed in another pathway to where you can reduce and show your carbon savings through mostly envelope measures. And while Gavin may have some prejudice against ResNet and their goings-ons and doings with the comment there, do understand that ResNet is achieving the gold standard for third-party certification along with quality assurance work, which has been written into the ICC codes. So this isn't like it's just some random organization out there just doing randomized things. This is a code that's written in nationally that's been adopted by several states, including 2 of our neighbors, Idaho and Montana. So to have your opinion as to your dislike to ResNet might be okay, that system is approved and has been instituted and implemented in several states across the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan, this is Chad. I have a question for you.
Go ahead, John.
So I appreciate that. That's great. I think ERI is a more rigorous system. Are the safeguards to make sure it's used correctly in other states also present in Washington?
Yeah, so originally when it was adopted in 2015, the ERI index for our area was roughly like 53. And the statement that was brought along with it was there was zero resistance to the adoption of the ERI index because in that calculation was an additional 15% that was written in because they were afraid people would try to comply with codes with just purely solar power or just purely mechanical upgrades. I even took a picture of that and sent it on to the head of the Washington State University's energy program and just said, hey, by the way, this is good to note. And then when the 2018 code rolled around, they actually lightened up the ERI restriction because they realized that 15% on top was actually way too restrictive. It made it above and beyond the typical other 2 methods of code compliance. And so they actually lightened up their load a bit on the requirement of that ERI index. And now I would also like to point out that this Passive House uses raters to qualify. Passive House often also requires Energy Star certification. So Passive House also relies on the ERI index.
I guess my question was, are the safeguards of those involved in the ERI process, are all those safeguards that are present in other states also present in Washington?
Yeah, there's a whole standard written in ICC on how it's supposed to be done.
And checks on as-built homes and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking, like if you're trying to say, is there a potential for somebody to abuse the system? Well, then the answer will always be yes for any system.
That's why I'm asking about safeguards, not just will people abuse the system? Of course they will, but are the safeguards there to keep them from doing too much abuse of the system?
Yeah, the ResNet raters have a built-in quality assurance network that requires 1% field QA and 10% file QA. So out of every 100 homes that is submitted for the ERI index through the rater path, there is quality assurance inspections that are being performed. And then there's another actually QA ResNet rater on here with me as well, with his Heath, which can contest to this. So we have to go above and beyond as QA guys, because he and I are both QA guys on behalf of ResNet. We have to go above and beyond on our testing. We have a higher educational requirement, and we go out and we either test afterwards or do a ride along with the individuals as a QA process. And then they have to send us 10% of their files that has to be QA'd. Now, I also want to point out that NEA sponsors several advanced utility programs that is completely structured on this exact same structure. So you have NEA giving out money from utility rebates to perform exactly the exact same thing that we just want to do for code compliance.
Right now, ERI is not the code goal, right? It's another thing that you might use the same software. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's technically, well, there's 4 that's approved for tax credits. There's 3 that are approved for HERS rating, and NREL software, I believe, is pretty much just sitting there waiting to get approved, and that's the Energy Plus software, which is open source. And so anybody can use the Energy Plus software to generate an ERI index. But to register to the HERS path, you have to register those files. And by registering those files, you're triggering the QA. And Washington State University actually has a providership that does QA services, as well as Heath, who's on the phone with us, as well as national guys like Bear. And then Chris McTaggart actually sits in on both committees and helps write the ICC codes. Like it's been really well, very thought out, very well vetted system.
I guess also just you brought up WSU. I talk to WSU from time to time, and their understanding is that there's no software that meets the R405 pathway. So
not legally, not as it sits, because you have to write a user-defined reference home that meets all of Washington State's amendments. So the 8.5-foot height restriction. You guys have a modified UA chart. Your UA values in the code book are slightly different than nationals. And so this stuff has to be taken into consideration in that user-defined reference home that has to be built for the 405. And if you talk to TRC and those guys and the others who are involved in developing user-defined reference homes, to build and vet a user-defined reference home is $3,000 to $5,000 per UDRH. It's not cheap. And that's why there's currently no UDRH that's available for Washington State code.
So that seems like it'd be hard to use the R405 path if there's no software that is approved to use it. But it seems like the 3,000 to 5,000 was actually, it's not nothing, but it's also, if all these home builders are going to save this money by using it, seems like a fairly reasonable investment.
You will need two though. You will need one for gas homes and you will need one for electric homes because the carbon that's in. And that's another one that makes the R405 almost impossible to do because no software will do just a straight carbon that's approved to do this. You got to take the energy fuel and use your guys' carbon conversion chart to figure out your CO2 intensity.
Okay, thank you. That's great input.
Good conversation. Okay, so any other public comment before the council takes this up? All right, I'm going to turn it over to the council members for discussion.
Diane, it's Doug again.
Yes.
I'm going to ask my same question again. What's the point of the 405 if you can't use it and you still have to use 406? Why is it there?
Right, it's written in the code as an option.
The Energy Code Tag reviewed it in detail and approved it, as did the MDE committee and the Building Code Council.
Well, that's not an answer. I mean, that doesn't, just because everybody, I won't use the analogy that comes to mind, but why is it there as a, the title of that 405 section is a simulated performance alternative, parentheses, performance. So if you can't use a simulated performance alternative pathway, i.e. you still have to apply all the requirements of energy credits in 406, why is it there? I understand that the TAG approved it and the MDE committee rubber stamped it and the code council voted on it, but why is it there? Or what's the point of it? What's the purpose of it if you still have to apply credits in the 406?
Yeah, Doug, this is Caroline. I can attempt to answer your question. I think part of the reason, there's an analogous situation in the commercial code or these other mandatory requirements. So even when you take the simulated path in the residential code or in the commercial code, there are some minimum requirements that have been established in the code and by the TAG. And so our 406 is just one of several or many. There's that entire table that we've been talking about, our 405.2, and then a similar table in the commercial code. So I think even with the modeling path, the intent is to establish some items that are not tradable. And in this case, that is those are 406 measures.
So based on that, I would say that why would anybody choose the model if you're simply just going to go pick from the menu in 406? What's the point of modeling?
Doug, this is Todd. I'd like to comment. I'm a structural engineer, so but perfect analogy. There are plenty of times we do performance-based modeling of structures for certain performance criteria, stiffness, so forth, but still have to fulfill obviously many prescriptive measures, right? And I can't speak to your direct question here outside of my subject area, but I guess my question would be, let me finish that point. a balance between a limited performance model and a prescriptive measures makes sense to me. And then a pathway where it's pure performance, where you really can prove, that's my interpretation here in 407. I guess my question would be, if you're doing both 405 and going and pushing that performance for certain other reasons, tax credits outside of the code, and adding these prescriptive measures, what level are we getting at relative to our real goal in 2030 of 70% of 2006 or whatever it might be? Is it really, are we doing harm, or are we just accelerating our eventual goal, our next step, in buying us in this discussion would really only buy us 3 years until we have to take that next step anyway? This might not be the forum to have this deliberation, but I just wanted to have context to why we're discussing it.
Well, it just feels like we've created a situation where we've dangled out this potential, but we're saying no, it doesn't matter what performance simulated performance modeling you've done. You still got to check the energy credit boxes in 406. It just seems like it's ultimately we're not actually providing an alternative method because you still have to meet the requirements of 406. And I'm not a subject matter expert, as you all know. It just seems obvious from reading it. So.
I guess I had one of the public commenters suggested that a home that met the 2015 energy code then also met the 2018 energy code, I believe under the performance path. And I guess that to me says that if I understood the commenter correctly, that that if one uses the performance path or 405, one doesn't need to do any better than the 2015 code, which would alarm me a little bit.
I'm not sure who made that comment. I don't remember that comment.
That was from Milt. This is Heath. I'm with Milt. So we did a test for Condren Homes, and they were building to that was the code that the permit was under, was the 2015. But I would argue that he was well beyond that. When we tested the home, he came in and around 2 air changes, slightly above, I believe, 2.1 or 2.05 or something. He was using a dual stage variable speed furnace, all ducts in conditioned space within the building envelope, a heat pump, hot water heater, good window U values, blown insulation, and it was a basement, good slab insulation. So it was under the 2015 code, but he was far and above the 2015 code, and it was passed. When we say passed, it was on the the 48% of carbon emissions compared to the 2006 home.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I had misunderstood what you had said. What I heard you say now is it was an above code home to begin with, and it also was able to pass the 2018 code. Okay,
yes,
thanks.
That's correct.
All right, other council members?
I guess I also want to ask what our potential paths forward are, because it's quite clear in the code that R406 is required as the answer, the opinion answer states. I guess what could we possibly hope to do that would make R406 not required, or is that not the goal of this?
Yeah, I mean, the code's the code. And the whole idea behind this is that one of the options is if they do the full energy modeling and under these programs like Jonathan was talking about, one thing is in the code, because the code officials can require this documentation under the simulated performance. If they approve the software and they go above and beyond with these energy modeling, can the building official determine that that is now a standalone and accept that? I guess that's one thing, and it would still comply with the code, but it would give the building official the option of approving if they go all out for these programs.
Okay, I guess I understand that the legislature requires the energy code to be the minimum throughout the state. And
Right.
so building code officials are, I guess, maybe Micah can weigh in, but not able to just eliminate code requirements for minimum energy performance.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Though, is they are able to approve as equivalent.
Right, that's what I'm going after, equivalent.
So it seemed like the only alternatives are to just simply approve the opinion that's been presented by staff, which seems to be the technically correct interpretation, or to go into emergency rule.
This is Mike. I would look to not go into emergency rule. I mean, it's as one of the other previous council members stated that this is a mandatory minimum, and your performance modeling is just a different path to achieve that mandatory minimum, but it's still the mandatory minimum of achieving those points, more or less. I'm fine with the opinion as stated. So there you go.
Okay.
Can we entertain a motion?
Yeah, I think I think we're kind of through with discussion. I don't hear any more questions, comments. So yeah, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Mike, a motion to approve.
I'll second that. This is Chell.
All right, let's take a roll call vote.
Andrew? I think I saw his name.
Yeah, I'm on. No.
Okay, Leanne?
Yes.
Doug?
No.
Tony?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Bob Hamlin?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Micah?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes.
All right, motion carries. The opinion will stand as stated. Thank you for everyone for the discussion. I know this was a hot topic and appreciate everybody's comment and input. I think one thing that we can take away from this is that maybe this would be a good discussion for the energy code tag coming up for the 2021.
I appreciate that. We will definitely take all of these comments, and I hope everybody who made comments is involved when we start the residential code discussion in about a year from now.
Yes, we will twist some arms. Okay, we'll move on now. With the next item was put on the agenda a little late, but it for an emergency rule. So we went ahead and put it on the agenda because it's important, and it deals with the Washington State Fire Marshal's request for an emergency rule certification for pre-engineered industrial or kitchen fire extinguishing systems technicians, and then the certification for engineer suppression system technicians. And we do have a written letter. Stoyan, do you want to present this? Do you want John to present it? How do you want to do this?
I think John is a better option because I learned about this issue a couple of days ago.
Okay, John, are you online?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So would you just give us some background and present this?
Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, first I want to thank you and the council for considering our emergency request. This was a little bit short just to scheduling of some time and some confusion on getting it on the agenda. So I really appreciate the effort that you've provided us to give us the opportunity to talk about this concept that we're having a problem with. So in accordance with RCW 3405-350, the State Building Code Council can enact an emergency rule to preserve public health, safety, and general welfare. Our association became aware that there's a problem with a lack of certified technicians in the workforce. So with the adoption of the 2018 Fire Code and WAC 5154A-904 specifically, it now requires existing fire extinguishing system technicians to hold either a joint certification from ICC and the National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors, or a singular certification from the National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors, depending on the types of systems. And as you said in your opening, that there's some pre-engineered systems and engineered systems that are affected by this code rule change. The certifications now required for basically anyone that's performing design, installation, inspection testing, or maintenance of these engineered suppression systems. And these engineered suppression systems are found all throughout our industries, from kitchens to spray booths to industrial and manufacturing operations. When we drafted this language in the code process, the industry and the code regulators agreed that these certifications were needed to increase the reliability of these engineered systems in their operation to address complex fire scenarios and commercial cooking, flammable spray finishing, and other hazardous operations. The problem before us that we're bringing is not the certification. The certification is not the problem. It's that most of the existing system technicians do not have certificates and now have been removed from the workforce to perform this vital service to the hospitality, industrial, and manufacturing sectors. And as we know, these sectors have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. And if they need services, and these systems are usually serviced every 6 months. So we've been in the pandemic already for a year, and with no end in sight, we need to make sure that we have a workforce that can address the problems. In some very quick research I did this morning, there are only 42 certified technicians in the entire state. Based on their reference, their residency, based on the ICC certification website, I placed all of these 42 individuals in 4 quadrants of the state. So in the Northeast quadrant, which would predominantly be Spokane, there is currently only 2 ICC certified technicians in the state of Washington. Now, granted, these people can move and there might be people from Seattle that go over there, but there's only 2 to service all of the industry, manufacturing, and hospitality sectors that we have. In the Southeast quadrant, which predominantly would be Tri-Cities, there's no qualified certified technicians currently. In Southwest Washington, there's only 4. And in Northwest Washington, including the Seattle metro area, there's only 36. And again, visualize 36 people trying to take care of all the restaurants, all the industrial, all the manufacturing sectors with systems that need to be tested no less than twice a year. One of the challenges for us to identify what success would look like is that there is really no registry of all of these types of technicians, because they're up until this point, there wasn't a requirement for that. And so I reached out to Seattle Fire because they do have a certification requirement within the city limits, and they have approximately, there might be some duplications, but around 120 technicians that have received approval to work within their city limits. So if we use the 36 that are in the Northwest quadrant, that would mean that only 30% of the workforce is available to service those 3 primary sectors of our economy. So You know, we don't want to bring a problem without a solution. To address this problem, you know, we're requesting a suspension of the certification requirements for 120 days. During this time, the State Association of Fire Marshals is willing to take a lead role in partnering with industry, the State Building Code Council, to increase the messaging of the rules, requirements, and how to gain the required certifications. We will continue to work closely with ICC and the National Association of Fire Equipment Distributors on the certification exam process and how to get into that process and successfully gain a certification. We really expect that these partnerships will ensure that a clear message will be received and that the number of certified technicians will increase significantly. Since the writing of my letter, which you'll notice was on the 16th, there's been 5 additional certifications issued by ICC NAFED. And so that's very promising. And the key to success for resolving this problem that we find ourselves in is really time. And so if this rate were to continue in a 4-month period of time, the state of Washington could realize an additional 80 certified technicians added to the workforce, or almost a 200% increase before the rule would be reenacted after the 120-day period. So I just wanted to take a moment and frame the picture of the problem and how we would go about solving it if we're allowed to, you know, put a pause on this this requirement for 4 months, basically. And then I'm confident that we're going to be in a much better place with a workforce that's certified, that meets the state law, and we can service those 3 primary industries. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
So I'm going to open this up to public testimony first.
This is Pat Dillon with Fire Chief Equipment.
Go ahead, Pat.
In addition to Chief Napier's response, our company anyway, has been diligently trying to get our tech certified within the time period. And we have had issues, and I know that some of the code officials that are on the line here are having the same types of problems with ICC. We have people that are not in the general larger population areas, and it's almost impossible because of bandwidth to try and do the testing online. And so we've had to send our guys that are in Port Angeles, Oak Harbor, to actually attend physically the tests. And at this particular time, because we just scheduled a test for one of our technicians, the soonest that you can get in to take that ICC test is April. And so there, I can't imagine, I bet a lot of the Eastern Washington problems are related to the inability of not being able to take the test online.
Hi, this is
Thank
Norm McCauca, and I'm with NAFED. There is an issue, and again, seems like COVID falls into all of this. With the ICC being in control of the 2 pre-engineered exams, they had 2 options. You could go to a company called Pearson VUE, which is a testing center. They test hundreds, if not, from medical to fire protection and various types of certification exams, postgraduate degree examinations, the whole bit. Once they had to cut testing capacity, depending on the state, to 10 to 20%, availability of those seats just aren't there. And then, like any other organization, if someone calls them and says, hey, I tested positive, then they shut down to do the deep clean. There is an option for taking the test online. It's still proctored. You use a laptop like we're all using now with the webcam, and you have to scan the room to make sure no one's hiding under the desk giving you answers and things like that. But as Pat mentioned, bandwidth is one of the bigger problems. And again, which we've all heard, people working out of home and some individual pockets are draining bandwidth availability to take some of these exams. So those are some of the difficulties. The other practical thing is there's some technicians out there that work on all three of those types of systems, they have to take 3 certification exams. You know, if the last exam you took was 15 or 20 years ago in school, a lot of people get panicky and have trouble taking it the first time. The pass rate on these tests, they're not that easy, is under 70%. I don't have the exact number handy. I know the last time we got them from the ICC, I think it was like about 63 or 64% of the people passed the exam on the first time. Now, and again, one other thing that did come up, and you know what we were trying to avoid, I don't want to mention names because it's based on a phone call I received. So I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I was a company that's trying to get all their technicians scheduled because local authorities will not let them do any inspections of engineered suppression systems. You know, they could have done them up to, I guess, January 30th, but couldn't do them after February 1st. And that could cause a series of problems for that industry, the end user. It could affect insurance. If it's a hospital, they become violation of the Joint Commission of Accreditation because they're not getting their work done in time. It covers so many different industries, from restaurants to paint booths, the aluminum processing, mining, forestry, all types of manufacturing. Most large 9/11 centers have clean agent systems in there that have to be inspected on an annual basis. We like the adoption of the 2018 code. We think it's wonderful. Our complaint from the service end of the industry was just trying to get the compliance date done. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the council members. Questions? Let me just, excuse me for 1 minute. I'm going to read the emergency rules that this is applied under. The immediate adoption, amendment, or repeal of a rule is necessary for the preservation of the public health, safety, or general welfare, and that observing the time requirements of notice and opportunity to comment upon adoption of a permanent rule would be contrary to the public interest. So, okay, that's what we're working under. So, okay, go ahead, council members.
So this is Micah. John, could you explain to me what the change is for this WAC? This is not necessarily, I mean, it's new language, but it's not a new requirement. So what is the change? Because in 2015, the language of 904.1.1 required a certification of service personnel for this type of equipment. So are you indicating that there's now a new requirement for an additional certification? What were the certifications previously, and how were those obtained if we can't get them now for something that is a different certification? I guess that's where I'm missing the request. This is not a new requirement. It might be new language that's more specific, but it's not a new requirement for certification based on my understanding of 904.1.1 of the 2015 code.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I think during the course of this meeting, it's pretty evident that when we make course adjustments with the code, that we really have to over communicate to make sure all parties are aware of the code changes, because there's a lot of stuff that's been hitting us with the code changes, and this is literally a very small subsection of what we do. And it's became apparent to the Fire Marshal Association and the code regulators that we need to enforce these certifications. And by doing that, we've now seen that there's a problem, is that we don't have enough people that are certified. And so it's really about the picture that's in front of us is that we only have 42 certified technicians in the state. The state code requires that all these technicians have this certification. So we have a very large problem that deals directly with public safety, and so that's really what the issue is.
Okay, so it's not necessarily this is a new certification requirement and nobody can get it. It's just a certification requirement that has been expanded and was not previously enforced.
I can't speak for all the code regulators, but I would say in some cases that is correct.
If I might, this is Pat Dillon again. One of the things that there are requirements in the city of Seattle for kitchen testing, and Spokane and Vancouver. And some jurisdictions, I believe, felt that they were complying with that part of the code by having manufacturer certifications. And now, for example, in Seattle, they're requiring that you have both. So you can't even take their test in Seattle for kitchen systems without already having the ICC certification. Thank you.
So John, I have a question. If you have limited resources on this, and if you had a restaurant that needed this inspection and they couldn't find anybody for a month, what happens to the restaurant?
John,
Oh,
sorry, John. I don't.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Okay, I kind of have a statement that I prepared, Council Chair, and it really goes along with that question. And so, John, feel free to jump in if you don't feel like this applies in the manner that you wish. But I think one of the big issues here and why this emergency rule, where it talks about the public health, safety, and general welfare, that question, Council Chair, really the answer to that is the reasoning behind this emergency rule. What's going to end up happening with this is that those in the service industry, who have already been hit very hard due to COVID, will basically have two options. They're going to have the option of either continuing to operate out of compliance with the state adopted code, which brings on major liability issues if there was a fire. Their other option is basically to discontinue use of their restaurant operations, which both can have a devastating effect on the community, I think. And so that's really, this puts not only the service industry as far as restaurants go, this also puts the local authorities having jurisdiction in a dilemma where they have to choose. Are they going to decline inspection reports and new installs from companies that have properly operated for years prior? Or are they going to allow it? And then if they allow it, what happens if something does happen in the interim where they allow it and they don't have their NAFED certification? What liabilities are there and where would those fall? And I think that's really where this request comes in. And I'm thrilled with the public comment today because not only do we have the State Fire Marshals Association with the request, but we also have NAFED and those third-party contractors and industry who are really unified in this proposal. And then I fully agree with them. And I think that this is a very important matter to exercise our emergency rule abilities on. John, if you have anything to add, go right ahead.
No, Tony, I think you touched on the importance of it. It's really going to put the decision is going to have to be made by the business owner, and it puts the regulators in a position where they're forced to follow the state rule. And if we can get a pause on it, then it'll allow those service industries to get service in the next 4 months while we catch up with the requirements for certification.
Do you feel confident that it would, you could catch up on the certifications within that time period?
If that question is directed towards me, I believe that is the case, but John, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe since the adoption, there's been a lot of chatter within the fire service and the industry, and I think we need to continue reaching out to small businesses and large businesses that perform this work because they're all impacted by the pandemic differently. But as Pat Dillon had said and Norb has said, that there are some challenges with getting to the testing centers due to the situation we're in. It's just not a real good time to try to do this right now. But yeah, I'm confident that you know, we should see at least 100% increase from where we are today. And again, I don't know how we measure success with this, but our intention is to do a single 4-month request. And that's definitely going to put us in a better position than we currently are today with only 42 certified technicians.
This is Micah. I think you could come back and we could extend it a second 120-day or 190-day period before we have to go into permanent rulemaking, if I'm not mistaken. But I do commend that all of you are getting together and saying, hey, we need to put a pause on something for us to get trained and get the right certifications. And if there's any way we can help with that, I think this is a good start. I do have a legal question on this, just for consideration on jurisdictions that may not adopt all the Washington state amendments. Your request for this emergency rule is to postpone implementation or enforcement of a WAC rule, which is technically an amendment. But if jurisdictions don't amend this section, then they still have authority to enforce certification under 904.1.1. So I guess my question is, if we rescind the WAC rule, can jurisdictions still enforce the base code language, because we're technically only rescinding an amendment and not the adoption of the base code language? So my question would be, should we look at modifying your emergency rule request to where the suspension is of the entirety of section 904.1.1, whether an amendment is there or not? Does that make any sense to anybody?
Yeah. Micah, if I may, I just have a quick question on that. Do you have 904.1.1 in front of you?
I do have the 2018 I code language.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you read the portion about the certification just real quick so we're aware?
Sure. It's 904.1.1, certification of service personnel for fire extinguishing equipment. This obviously falls under section 904 of alternative fire extinguishing system. States service personnel providing or conducting maintenance on automatic fire extinguishing systems other than automatic sprinkler systems shall possess a valid certificate issued by an approved governmental agency or other approved organization for the type of system and work performed.
Okay.
That's the base code language. So really what the state did for 904.1.1 was just change really the last part of that paragraph. If you look at the WAC rule, which you may have in front of you, it states the same thing, but the last portion says shall possess the appropriate ICC NAFED certification.
Right, and it's my understanding that if we left 904.1.1 as it's written in the model code, then it still allows the local authority to accept stuff outside of the ICC NAFED certification that is now listed. And so I still think it serves a purpose being in place. That's my personal opinion, but John, if you have something to say on that or anyone else, feel free, but at least that still allows some sort of governance from the local level instead of a specific NAFED ICC, which is kind of the cog in the wheel, if you will.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I was just curious on that legal question. And are there other portions of the WAC, because obviously it's not just 904.1.1, of these amendments that are important that may be a problem if we are suspending enforcement of that WAC rule?
I don't believe so, but John, you can speak on that if you have anything further, or Ray.
Yeah, correct, Tony. I'm not aware of any other conflict with any other portions of the WAC or the model code, that this is kind of a scalpel approach to just going in and taking care of one little piece of it that's problematic. As Tony said, we got to fix the problem that's in the cog so the machine can run smoothly. And again, this is really focused predominantly on the pre-engineered and engineered fire suppression systems. And as Pat had said, prior to this, you know, most all regulators use the manufacturer's testing as the rule for someone being trained. And so we've raised the bar, and industry is supportive of that. It's just that we've got to we just need some more time to implement it. Appreciate it.
Okay.
So a follow up on that, does that, so 904.12, where the state modifies the commercial cooking system requirements, that doesn't look like it has anything to do with certification. those changes would also be suspended per this emergency rule.
Actually, in my request, I think I specifically spoke to just the pre-engineered, engineered systems, and was not intended to address 904.12.
Okay, but your request in the first sentence says to suspend the requirements of WAC 54A 904.
Correct, and then it continues and says specifically those tests, those certification requirements. So I apologize if there's confusion, but
no, it's not confusion. I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Yes.
Could we modify that request to say 904.1.1 through 904.1.1.3?
correct. That would be great. I appreciate that.
Yep.
So
I just wouldn't want to suspend something that somebody actually wants, or it's okay.
You're not suspending the WAC, you're just referring to the code specifically, those sections?
It would be those sections in WAC 5154A 0904.
Oh, okay. So you're, yeah, okay. Specifically those sections. Okay.
With that, Council Chair, if I could make a motion for this, is that okay?
Okay, I have a question first,
sure.
Joanne. Can we accept, can this qualify as a proposal for emergency rule with a letter? Are we okay with that?
I think I understand what the request is, and if the council members are okay with it, we will work around it.
Okay, all right. So someone is going to make a motion?
Madam Chair, can I address that one comment?
Yes.
Yeah, I as being an end user of this process, it was very unclear for me as an end user. By looking at your policies on this SBC website, it's very clear what the process is for making state amendments and such, and code opinions, but there's really no regulations or rules to help the end users navigate this process. So one of my recommendations to the council, if you would accept it, would be that potentially you look at establishing rules for the submittal process, because it's I couldn't find anything. So I apologize if this isn't the appropriate format.
Okay, no, that's good input, and we'll just deal with what we've got in front of us. So I know someone was going to make a motion.
Yeah, this is Tony. I'll make a motion to the enactment of a 120-day emergency rule to suspend the requirements of WAC 5154A 904, specifically sections 904.1.1, 904.1.1.1 through 904.1.1.3.
This is Micah. I will second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, no other questions? Okay, I think we'll just take a voice vote. Oh, go ahead.
This is Norm McCalca. Just a question.
Oh, okay.
Because again, I'm not into policy and regulations in the same thing you deal with. As the proposal that Tony just read, there's no time frame?
Yes.
120 days.
20 days.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, that's emergency rule length. And
Okay,
then
thank you very much.
at 120 days, we can do it again, or
The way I read it, we can up it if we're in the process of making permanent rule.
Right.
Well, there is a difference here. So if we have the emergency rule, it will be alive for 120 days, and then there is a text in the law that says identical or substantially similar emergency rules may not be adopted in sequence unless conditions have changed. And there is more than that, but this is the most important one. So I don't know if during this meeting now or later with discussions, we need to understand what the exact task is. If it's for 120 days and this is the intent, we don't need to start with the regular rulemaking. But if the intent is, okay, let's try it for 120 days and see if there are enough certified professionals, then this changes the game a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think that was the motion, but I do want to clarify something in the motion. I think that we also need to, well, maybe we don't have to say that. Emergency rule adopted under the section takes effect upon filing with the code advisor unless a later date is specified. So I guess with the motion, the way it is, it would be, it would take effect upon filing. So I have a motion and second. Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Doug.
Yeah.
To address Stoyan's concern about turning it into a permanent rule, could we, there's nothing to prevent us from creating another 120-day emergency rule at the end of this one, is there not?
No, there's not, Doug. And if in a side conversation with John, correct me if I'm wrong, the intent, they didn't want us to really go into permanent rulemaking. They just wanted the 120 days. And then if we don't do anything with the 103, it falls off. It just goes back to the original code.
Right, and if there's a need to extend it in 3 months, we have the option to do that.
If we're in the I believe the code the RCW reads that if we're in the process of permanent rulemaking.
That's correct. Yes, and this is important.
Yeah. So we have to be we have to be in the permanent rulemaking process.
But we could take a motion to go into permanent rulemaking 100 days from now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's where I was trying to go with it.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't hear any really any council members speaking out against this, so I'm just going to take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gentlemen, you bet.
Thank you, John.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so we're doing good on time. We use every single minute. So we'll go into the staff report. So Doyen, I guess, take it away.
Yes, I am. So with the staff report compared to Richard's presentation last time at the meeting in January, there are not that many changes, but I have a few things. Just give me a second to pull it up. So the first one is I want to remind council members about the Open Public Meeting Act. There is a requirement in RCW 42.30.205. The requirement is for training within 90 days of appointment and every 4 years thereafter. So for the new members and members that had the training a while ago, please contact us and we can provide you with a link. I believe there was a link that you can take the training. And then ICC voting members. So we have maximum voting representatives 12, 4 for staff and 8 for council members. Currently, we have approved 3 votes. This is for the staff, Ray, Krista, and myself, and we have 1 slot for additional position that is not filled yet for code specialist. We are struggling a little bit with that, and I will specify what the issue is. And council members, we have pending approval. Again, 8 seats, and we have Diane, Chell, Caroline, Rob Draper, Andrew, Al French, Doug, and Todd. This is just for your information. And for the staff report, again, most of the things that Richard addressed the last time are the same. For the 2024 energy code, you know, ICC is considering changes, how they deal with the energy code. And again, it was discussed that ICC intends to move the energy code to a standard rather than a code. And the standard process is less transparent and compared to the code development process, and decreases the influence jurisdiction may have on the code. So what the ICC did, ICC completed their comment period and public hearing and will be making a decision sometime late February or early March. So far, the comments are running about 25% in favor of moving to the standard process and 75% in favor of keeping the current code process. So Krista is following this, and these are the results for now. And for the code specialist, we have one opening. The first recruitment was unsuccessful. We had only one candidate, and we re-advertised. We went further and re-advertised at the ICC side, WABO, Washington State Association of Code Enforcement, Washington Association of Permit Technicians, and a few others. And we have two candidates that applied for the position, and currently the applications are being evaluated. So this is the news I can share. And I was going to talk about the model code tags, but we already addressed that in a different item of the agenda. So this is all I have as modifications to the staff report.
Thank you, Stoyan. All right, we are on to other business. Does any council member have other business? Nothing. Everybody's quiet. Okay. Well, once again, I want to thank everyone for today's meeting. This was the first Zoom and seemed to work out pretty well. So we'll continue on with that for a little while anyway. And thanks again. Just a reminder, our next council meeting will be March 19th. And everyone have a good weekend. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. This is Tony.
Second, it's Doug.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay healthy, stay safe.
Yes.
Tell me what to do.